The bullet meant for a little girl found Daniel Hayes instead, and in those 3 seconds between impact and collapse, everything changed. When CEO Clara Donovan arrived at the mall massacre 3 minutes later, she found her daughter alive because a stranger in a torn baseball cap had made a choice that would shatter every assumption she'd ever made about heroes. If you want to know how a single dad bleeding on cold marble tiles became the most powerful security chief in the tech industry, stay with me until the end. And comment below which city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The morning Daniel Hayes kissed his 8-year-old son Ethan goodbye, he had no idea he'd end the day with a bullet lodged in his left arm. No premonition warned him that his routine Saturday errands would thrust him into a nightmare that would change not just his life, but the lives of dozens of strangers he'd never met. "Dad, can we get pizza tonight?" Ethan asked, his backpack bouncing as he climbed out of their rusty Honda Civic at his friend Tommy's house. "We'll see, buddy. Money's tight until payday." Daniel ruffled his son's dark hair, the same shade as his own, before the gray had started creeping in at 35. "Be good for Mrs. Chen." "I'm always good," Ethan protested, with a gap-toothed grin that made Daniel's chest ache with love. "That's my boy." Daniel watched until Ethan disappeared through the front door, waving enthusiastically from the window. Single fatherhood wasn't the life he'd planned. But 3 years after Sarah's death, he'd learned to navigate the impossible balance of work, parenting, and grief. The warehouse job at Morrison Logistics didn't pay much, but it kept food on the table and a roof over their heads in the cramped 2-bedroom apartment on the south side of the city. He pulled his faded Orioles cap lower over his eyes and headed toward Grandview Mall. Just a few errands, groceries, new shoes for Ethan since he'd outgrown his last pair seemingly overnight, maybe a small toy if there was anything left in the budget. The same routine as every other Saturday, carved out between his Friday night shift and the Sunday double he'd picked up to cover rent. Grandview Mall sat like a gleaming monument to middle-class aspirations in the heart of downtown, its glass facades reflecting the October sun. Daniel parked in the free section of the garage, a 15-minute walk from the entrance, and made his way through the familiar maze of shops. The place hummed with weekend energy, teenagers clustered around the phone store, young mothers pushing strollers past window displays, the elderly mall walkers making their prescribed circuits. He just finished at Payless Shoes, a bag containing Ethan's new sneakers swinging from his calloused hand when he decided to cut through the food court. The smell of Chinese food and pizza made his stomach growl, reminding him he'd skipped breakfast to save a few dollars. That's when he saw her. The little girl couldn't have been more than 6, maybe 7 years old. She stood near the fountain in a buttercup yellow dress with white daisies embroidered along the hem, the kind of outfit that cost more than Daniel made in a week. Her blonde hair was pulled into 2 perfect pigtails tied with matching yellow ribbons. She was completely absorbed in her ice cream cone, a towering swirl of strawberry and vanilla that dripped pink drops onto her small hands. Something about her made Daniel slow his pace. Maybe it was the way she stood so still in the chaos of the food court, like a tiny island of innocence. Maybe it was how she reminded him of Ethan at that age before life had taught them both that ice cream cones were luxuries. Or maybe on some primal level he couldn't explain, he sensed what was about to happen. The first gunshot cracked through the air like thunder in a clear sky. For a heartbeat, the entire mall froze. That impossible moment where the human brain struggles to reconcile the sound of violence with the mundane safety of Saturday shopping. Someone dropped a tray of food. The clatter seemed unnaturally loud in the sudden silence. Then came the second shot, and hell arrived at Grandview Mall. Screams erupted from every direction. The crowd transformed into a panicked mass, bodies colliding, stumbling, falling. Parents grabbed children. Teenagers abandoned their phones to run. The elderly mall walkers pressed themselves against storefronts. Daniel's military training, buried under years of civilian life, roared back to life. His eyes swept the scene in practiced arcs, cataloging exits, cover, positions, threats. The shooter emerged from behind the information kiosk, a young man maybe 25 wearing a black hoodie and carrying what looked like a modified Glock. His movements were erratic, uncoordinated, amateur, dangerous. But Daniel wasn't looking at the shooter anymore. The little girl in the yellow dress stood frozen, exactly where she'd been, her ice cream cone still clutched in one small hand. The panic had parted around her like water around a stone, leaving her exposed in the middle of the food court, Her blue eyes were wide with confusion, not yet understanding why everyone was running, why the loud noises kept happening. The shooter turned his weapon swinging in a wild arc toward the girl. Daniel didn't think. Thinking would have killed them both. His body moved with remembered precision muscles responding to training drilled into him a lifetime ago in Afghanistan. The shopping bag flew from his hand. His worn work boots pounded across the polished floor. 20 feet. 15. 10. The shooter's finger tightened on the trigger. Daniel dove. His body collided with the little girl just as the gun fired. The bullet meant for a child's heart tore through Daniel's left bicep instead. The impact spun him, but he managed to wrap his arms around the girl, cradling her against his chest as they hit the ground hard. His shoulder took the brunt of the fall, protecting her from the marble floor. The ice cream cone exploded against the tiles, strawberry and vanilla, spreading in a grotesque parody of blood. Stay down, Daniel whispered urgently into the girl's ear, though she hadn't made a sound. Shock he recognized. He'd seen it before in combat zones, that eerie silence that preceded either screams or shutdown. More gunshots echoed through the mall. Daniel pressed the girl beneath him, making his body a shield. His arms screamed in protest, hot blood soaking through his flannel shirt, but he'd endured worse. The marble floor was cold against his cheek. He could feel the girl's rapid heartbeat against his chest, a hummingbird trapped in a cage of bone and muscle. "It's okay," he murmured, though nothing about this was okay. "I've got you. What's your name, sweetheart?" "Lily," came the tiny whisper. "That's a beautiful name. I'm Daniel. We're going to be fine, Lily. Just stay really still for me, okay, like we're playing statue." She nodded against his chest, her small hands clutching his shirt. Daniel risked lifting his head slightly, assessing. The shooter had moved deeper into the mall, pursuing the fleeing crowd. Sirens wailed in the distance. 3 minutes, maybe 4, until police arrival. They needed cover. A overturned table lay 5 feet away. Daniel gathered himself, ignoring the fire spreading from his arm through his entire left side. "Lily, when I say go, we're going to crawl to that table. Can you do that for me?" Another nod. "You're so brave." "Ready, go." They moved together, Daniel half dragging himself with his good arm while keeping Lily protected beneath him. They'd just reached the table when he heard it, the distinctive click of a magazine being ejected. Reload. The shooter was doubling back. Daniel positioned Lily in the safest spot, pressing her into the corner where the table met an overturned bench. "Stay here. Don't move no matter what." "Don't leave me." Her small hand grabbed his bloody shirt. "I'm not leaving. I'm just going to make sure he doesn't come this way." It was a lie, and maybe she knew it. The shooter was definitely coming this way, drawn by some sick instinct to return to where he'd started. Daniel had no weapon, one functioning arm, and approximately 30 seconds before the man would have a clear line of sight to their position. He looked around desperately. There, a fire extinguisher mounted on the wall, maybe 10 feet away. It would have to do. Daniel moved in a low crouch, his combat instincts overriding the civilian he'd become. The pain in his arm faded to background noise, processed and compartmentalized. He'd reached the extinguisher when footsteps echoed closer. Too close. Daniel yanked the extinguisher free and spun just as the shooter rounded the corner. For a split second, they locked eyes. The young man's face was streaked with tears, his pupils dilated with drugs, or adrenaline, or both. The gun started to rise. Daniel didn't give him the chance. The extinguisher connected with the shooter's wrist with a crack that echoed through the food court. The gun flew from nerveless fingers skittering across the floor. Daniel followed through with his momentum, bringing the metal cylinder up into the man's jaw. The shooter dropped like a stone. Daniel kicked the gun away, then dropped to one knee as his vision grayed at the edges. Blood loss. He'd lost more than he'd thought. The sirens were louder now, so close. He needed to get back to Lily, make sure she was, "Lily, Lily, where are you?" A woman's voice, high with panic, cut through the chaos. Daniel turned to see a figure sprinting through the mall entrance, flanked by what looked like a security detail. The woman was everything Daniel wasn't. Designer suit, perfectly styled auburn hair, the kind of presence that commanded boardrooms and bent reality to her will. Clara Donovan had arrived. She moved through this chaos like a force of nature, her security detail struggling to keep up. Her eyes swept the devastation until they found what she was looking for: a small figure in a yellow dress emerging from behind an overturned table. "Mommy!" Lily ran to her mother, and Clara dropped to her knees, gathering the child against her with a sob that seemed to come from the depths of her soul. Her hands ran over Lily's body, checking for injuries, finding only ice cream stains and tear tracks. "Baby, my baby, are you hurt? Are you okay?" "The man saved me," Lily said, pointing back toward Daniel. "He got hurt instead of me." Clara's gaze followed her daughter's finger to where Daniel knelt on the bloodied floor, still holding the fire extinguisher, his left arm painted crimson. Their eyes met across the wreckage of the food court, and something passed between them, a recognition that transcended social boundaries and economic disparities. In that moment, Daniel wasn't a warehouse worker in a torn baseball cap, and Clara wasn't a CEO worth millions. They were simply two parents in a world where children could be lost in an instant. "You saved her," Clara said, the words barely audible. Daniel tried to respond, but the extinguisher slipped from his fingers. The world tilted sideways, and he had a strange thought that Ethan would be disappointed about the pizza. Then darkness rushed up to meet him, and he fell into it gratefully. Clara Donovan's shocked face, the last thing he saw. The police arrived 43 seconds later, flooding the mall with uniforms and protocol. Paramedics swarmed Daniel's unconscious form, working with practiced efficiency to stem the bleeding and stabilize him for transport. The shooter was cuffed and carried away on a stretcher, his jaw clearly broken but breathing steadily. Clara held Lily throughout it all, watching as they loaded Daniel into an ambulance. Her head of security, Marcus Webb, appeared at her elbow. He was a large man, former Secret Service hired for an obscene amount of money to keep Clara and Lily safe. A job he'd failed at today. "Ma'am, we should go. The police will want statements, but I can arrange for them to come to your home." "That man," Clara said, not moving. "Find out everything about him." "Ma'am." "Everything Marcus, who he is, where he lives, his family, his job, his history. Everything." Marcus frowned, his calculating mind already spinning scenarios. "You think he might have been involved? Some kind of setup?" Clara turned to look at him, and Marcus actually took a step back from the fury in her eyes. "That man took a bullet meant for my daughter. He saved her life while you were sitting in the car checking your phone. So yes, I want to know everything about him. I want to know his favorite coffee and his shoe size and the name of his first-grade teacher. Is that clear?" "Crystal, ma'am." Clara turned back to watch the ambulance pull away its sirens, adding to the symphony of chaos. Lily pressed against her side, unusually quiet for a child who normally filled every silence with chatter. "Is he going to be okay, Mommy?" Clara thought about lying, about offering the comfortable reassurance that parents reflexively provided. But Lily had just experienced something that would mark the before and after of her childhood. She deserved truth delivered gently. "I don't know, sweetheart, but he's strong and brave, and the doctors will take very good care of him. He told me his name was Daniel. He said I was brave too." "You were. You are." "My ice cream got ruined." Clara laughed, a broken sound that was half sob. "We'll get you another ice cream, all the ice cream you want. I want to get one for Daniel too, for when he wakes up." "Of course, baby, of course." The mall was shutting down now, crime scene tape creating a maze of yellow boundaries. Clara let Marcus guide them toward the exit, but her mind stayed with the stranger bleeding into an ambulance. Daniel. A warehouse worker according to the uniform shirt she'd glimpsed beneath the blood. A man who'd had no reason to risk his life for a child he'd never met, but had done so without hesitation. In her world of leveraged buyouts and hostile takeovers of contracts that anticipated every form of betrayal, such selflessness was as foreign as another language. People always wanted something. They positioned themselves, calculated advantages, maximized opportunities. They didn't throw themselves into bullets for strangers' children. But Daniel had. The October sun felt obscene in its brightness as they emerged from the mall. Clara's Bentley waited at the curb, having been moved from the parking garage by her driver. She settled Lily into the back seat, noting how her daughter clutched her hand with unusual force. "Marcus," she called before her security chief could enter the follow car. "I want security footage from the mall. Every angle, every second. The police will do their job. I want our own copy, and I want to know which hospital they took him to." Marcus nodded, already pulling out his phone. Clara slid into the Bentley beside Lily, gathering her daughter close. The little girl was quiet, processing trauma in the way children did in fragments, and silence punctuated by unexpected observations. "He had kind eyes," Lily said suddenly. "Even when he was scared." Clara pressed a kiss to her daughter's hair, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo, grounding herself in the reality that Lily was here alive whole, because of a stranger named Daniel. The drive to their estate in Westfield took 30 minutes, during which Clara fielded calls from her board of directors, her ex-husband in London, and her mother in Florida. News traveled fast in their circles, especially news involving the attempted murder of one of the state's most prominent business leaders' children. She kept the calls brief, her responses automatic, her mind elsewhere. The Georgian mansion rose before them like a fortress, all brick and ivy and old money solidity. Clara had bought it after the divorce, needing something that felt permanent in a life that had suddenly become unmoored. 22 rooms for 2 people seemed excessive, but the security was excellent, or had seemed so until today. Mrs. Donovan. Helena. Their housekeeper met them at the door, her usually composed face etched with worry. "I saw the news. Is Miss Lily—" "She's fine," Clara said, though fine was a relative term. "Could you draw her a bath? Use the lavender bubbles." "Of course, come little one," but Lily clung tighter to Clara's hand. "I want to stay with you." "I'm not going anywhere, sweetheart, but you need to get cleaned up. I'll be right here when you're done." It took several more minutes of coaxing before Lily agreed to go with Helena, and only after Clara promised to sit outside the bathroom door. As soon as her daughter was out of sight, Clara sagged against the wall, the adrenaline finally abandoning her to leave only exhaustion and a rage so profound it made her hands shake. Her phone buzzed. Marcus. "Daniel Hayes," he said without preamble. 35 years old, single father-son named Ethan, age 8, works warehouse at Morrison Logistics night shift primarily. Address is 42B Elm Street, South District. That's the Riverside Apartments. Clara knew the area. It was the kind of neighborhood people like her drove around, not through. Financial status. Checking account shows $247. Savings empty. Currently 3 days late on rent, has been late 4 of the last 6 months. Credit cards maxed. No criminal record. Clean driving record, except for 2 parking tickets, both paid late with penalties. The picture forming made Clara's chest tight. A single father struggling to make ends meet, the kind of invisible person her driver probably passed a dozen times without her noticing from the back of her Bentley. Family. The mother. Sarah Hayes, deceased 3 years, cancer. Medical bills went to collections, settled for partial payment last year. No other family in state. Clara closed her eyes. Of course, because the universe wasn't satisfied with giving this man poverty and single parenthood, it had to add grief and medical debt to the equation. Military service, Marcus continued, and his tone shifted slightly. This is where it gets interesting. Army 2007 to 2015. 3 tours in Afghanistan. Bronze Star Purple Heart Army Commendation Medal with Valor. Honorable discharge as Staff Sergeant. Specialized in urban combat and close protection. Close protection. You mean bodyguard detail for high-value targets? He protected diplomats and military brass in active war zones. Marcus paused. Ma'am, this man was trained to do exactly what he did today. But that didn't explain why he'd done it. Training didn't make you take a bullet for a stranger. Training taught you to assess, evaluate, prioritize. A single father should have prioritized staying alive for his own child. Which hospital? St. Mary's. He's in surgery. The bullet did significant muscle damage but missed the major arteries. Prognosis is good. I want the best orthopedic surgeon in the state on his case. Ma'am, with respect, that might be seen as, I don't care how it's seen, make it happen. And Marcus, the son Ethan, where is he? More phone work. With a neighbor, Mrs. Chen, father was supposed to pick him up at 6. Clara looked at her watch. 4:47 p.m. In just over an hour, an 8-year-old boy would start wondering why his father wasn't there. By 7, he'd be worried. By 8, terrified. Send someone to inform them about what happened, carefully. Make sure the boy knows his father is going to be okay. That's not really our... Marcus, I'm going to say this once. That man's blood is on the floor of Grandview Mall because he chose my daughter's life over his own. There is nothing that is not our responsibility when it comes to him and his family. Am I clear? Yes, ma'am. Clara ended the call and slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor of her mansion's marble foyer. From the bathroom upstairs, she could hear Lily's voice asking Helena about Daniel, wondering if he liked strawberry ice cream or vanilla better. The house phone rang. Clara ignored it. It rang again, then her cell, then Marcus calling. Ma'am, you need to take this. It's Channel 7 News. Someone leaked cell phone footage from the mall. The story's going viral. Of course it was. In the age of smartphones, every tragedy became content, every hero a hashtag. Clara accepted the call, switching to her CEO voice, calm-controlled, giving away nothing. Miss Donovan Amanda Pierce from Channel 7. First, let me say how relieved we are that Lily is safe. Thank you. We've obtained footage of the incident. The man who saved your daughter, we've identified him as Daniel Hayes. Do you have any comment on his actions? Mr. Hayes acted with extraordinary courage. My family owes him a debt we can never repay. Our sources say he's a warehouse worker with no connection to your family or company. Do you find it surprising that a stranger would risk his life this way? Clara thought about the expected response, something about the goodness of humanity, about everyday heroes, the kind of soundbite that would play well on the evening news. But Lily was upstairs asking about ice cream flavors, and Daniel Hayes was in surgery because he'd made an impossible choice. I find it humbling, she said finally. In my world, everything is transactional. Everything has a price, a negotiation, an angle. Mr. Hayes reminded me that some things, the best things, exist outside that paradigm. He saw a child in danger and acted not because of who she was or what he might gain, but because it was right. That's not surprising. It's miraculous. Will you be reaching out to him personally? When he's recovered, yes. There are rumors your company will be offering him a reward. The question irritated her. Money. It always came back to money, as if cash could balance the equation of a life saved. Mr. Hayes didn't save my daughter for a reward. To offer one would diminish what he did. We'll handle this matter privately and with the dignity Mr. Hayes deserves. She ended the call before Amanda could ask another question. Her phone immediately buzzed with texts from board members, friends, her ex-husband demanding to know why she hadn't called him first. She turned it off. Helena appeared at the top of the stairs. She's asking for you. Clara climbed the stairs on legs that felt disconnected from her body. The master bathroom was filled with lavender-scented steam. Lily sat in the tub, surrounded by bubbles, looking smaller than her 7 years. Mommy, do you think Daniel has bad dreams? The question caught Clara off guard. What makes you ask that, sweetheart? He had marks. On his arms when his shirt got torn, like the ones Daddy has. Clara's ex-husband had served in the Marines before entering banking. He'd come back from Iraq with scars, both visible and hidden, the hidden ones ultimately destroying their marriage. Some people have had to do very hard things, Clara said carefully. Sometimes those things leave marks. Is that why he knew how to stop the bad man? Maybe. I want to say thank you when he wakes up. We will. Lily nodded, satisfied, and went back to making bubble mountains. Clara watched her daughter play this miracle of a child who existed because a stranger had chosen courage over safety. Her phone turned back on showed 17 missed calls. The story was everywhere now. Mall hero saves billionaire's daughter. The footage was grainy but clear enough. Daniel's dive, the impact of the bullet, the way he'd curled his body around Lily like a human shield. The comments were already pouring in, strangers dissecting 15 seconds of violence, debating whether Daniel was a hero or an idiot, whether Clara should reward him, or whether he'd been planted there, some elaborate scheme. The internet, Clara reflected, was where human decency went to die. Marcus called. Surgery's complete, successful. He'll be in recovery for a few hours, then moved to a room. The son has been informed that his father was hurt, but will be okay. Mrs. Chen is keeping him overnight. Clara started, then stopped. What did she want to meet this man properly? To thank him? To understand why he'd done it? I want updates every hour. Understood. Ma'am, there's something else. The shooter, his name is William Brennan, 23 years old. History of mental illness, recently stopped taking medication. His social media suggests he was targeting random victims, no specific connection to you or your company. Random. Lily could have died because of random. Because a sick young man went off his medication and brought a gun to a mall on a Saturday afternoon. The arbitrariness of it made Clara want to scream. Instead, she helped Lily out of the tub, wrapped her in the softest towel, and carried her to bed. Her daughter fell asleep quickly, exhausted by trauma, clutching the stuffed rabbit she'd had since infancy. Clara sat in the chair beside Lily's bed, unable to leave. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw it differently. Daniel not being there, being a second slower, choosing self-preservation over sacrifice. She saw herself arriving to find yellow fabric soaked in red, saw herself identifying a body instead of embracing a survivor. The hours passed in a haze of what-ifs and could-have-beens. Marcus sent updates. Daniel was stable, awake, briefly asking about his son. The media had discovered his military history, were already crafting narratives about the war hero security guard. Someone had started a GoFundMe that had already raised $30,000. At midnight, Clara made a decision. Marcus, I need you to arrange something. The next morning, while October sunshine streamed through hospital windows and weekend visitors navigated the maze of corridors, Clara Donovan walked into room 314 at St. Mary's Hospital. She dressed deliberately, jeans and a sweater instead of her usual power suit, human instead of CEO. Daniel Hayes was awake, his left arm immobilized in a complex brace, an IV dripping steadily into his right. He looked younger without the baseball cap, his dark hair military short, the stubble on his jaw making him look tired rather than rugged. His eyes, Lily was right. They were kind, widened when he saw her. Miss Donovan. Clara, please. She moved into the room, noting the sparse surroundings. No flowers, no cards, no evidence that anyone had been here except medical staff. How are you feeling? Like I got shot, he said, then winced. Sorry. Pain meds make me a little loopy. Don't apologize. You earned the right to say whatever you want. An awkward silence stretched between them. Clara had negotiated billion-dollar deals, faced down hostile boards, but standing in this hospital room, she felt completely out of her depth. Is Lily okay? Daniel asked finally. They told me she wasn't hurt, but she's fine. Asking about you, actually. She wants to know if you prefer strawberry or vanilla ice cream. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Strawberry. Always strawberry. I'll tell her. Clara moved closer, taking the visitor's chair. Mr. Hayes. Daniel, I need to thank you. What you did. I did what anyone would do. No. The word came out sharper than intended. No, you didn't. There were dozens of people in that food court. They ran. You didn't. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, his gaze dropping to the white hospital blanket. I've been in situations like that before. Training kicks in. Training doesn't make you take a bullet for a stranger's child. She reminded me of... He stopped, jaw tightening. Of what? Doesn't matter. But Clara thought she understood. A single father seeing a little girl in danger, thinking of his own child, making an instant calculation that her life was worth more than his own survival. Your son, she said carefully. Ethan, he's been told you're okay. Mrs. Chen is taking good care of him. Daniel's composure cracked slightly. He must be scared. I can't. He tried to sit up, gasped as the movement pulled at his injury. We've arranged for him to visit this afternoon with Mrs. Chen. Hospital rules are being bent slightly. My security team has been monitoring the situation. Daniel's expression shifted, wariness replacing vulnerability. Why would your security team be? Because the man who saved my daughter's life has an 8-year-old son who needs to know his father is okay. Because that same man is 3 days late on rent, and I'm guessing the hospital bills aren't going to help that situation. I don't need charity. There it was pride. The same pride that made him work double shifts instead of applying for assistance that kept him in worn boots while his son got new shoes. It's not charity, Clara said carefully. It's gratitude. And frankly, it's self-interest. Self-interest. I own a technology company, Mr. Hayes. We deal with corporate espionage, intellectual property theft, constant security threats. I employ a team of security professionals who were in the parking lot when my daughter nearly died. You were in the right place at the right time, yes, but you also had the skills and the character to act. That combination is rarer than you might think. She could see him processing, trying to figure out the angle. There was always an angle in her world. What are you saying? I'm saying that when you're recovered, I'd like to offer you a job. Director of Corporate Security for Donovan Technologies. The salary is $150,000 a year to start full benefits educational assistance for your son and a company car because I'm guessing that Honda in the lot has seen better days. Daniel stared at her. You're offering me a job because I saved Lily. I'm offering you a job because you're qualified. Bronze Star Purple Heart. 8 years of close protection experience in active war zones. The fact that you saved my daughter just means I know exactly what kind of man I'd be hiring. Your current security team. Failed. Marcus Webb makes $200,000 a year to keep my family safe. Yesterday he was checking emails while you were bleeding on marble floors. He'll be transitioning to other opportunities. Daniel was quiet for a long moment, and Clara could see the war playing out behind his eyes. Pride versus pragmatism, independence versus opportunity. What makes you think I want to go back to that life? He asked finally. Security protection, constant threat assessment. I left that behind for a reason. Because you came home to be a father, because your wife was sick and needed you, because you thought you could build something simple and safe. Clara leaned forward. But yesterday proved that the world doesn't let us leave our training behind. You didn't think about protecting Lily, you just did it, because that's who you are. You don't know me. I know enough. I know you work night shifts to spend days with your son. I know you're drowning in medical debt from your wife's illness, but still haven't declared bankruptcy. I know you gave Ethan new shoes yesterday while yours are held together with duct tape. I know that when you saw my daughter in danger, you didn't calculate odds or consider consequences. You acted. Daniel's jaw worked silently. Outside the room, the hospital continued its Sunday morning routines, doctors making rounds, families arriving with flowers and worry. Can I think about it? Of course, but Daniel, while you're thinking, consider this: Ethan deserves a father who doesn't have to choose between rent and groceries. You deserve a job that recognizes your worth. And frankly, my company needs someone who understands that real security isn't about expensive suits and surveillance technology. It's about the willingness to step between danger and the innocent. She stood to leave, then turned back. Lily wanted me to give you this. She pulled out a piece of paper, crayon bright and carefully folded. Daniel opened it with his good hand. It was a drawing, 2 stick figures, one tall in blue, one small in yellow, holding hands. Above them in shaky 7-year-old handwriting, "Thank you, Daniel, from Lily." Clara watched something break in Daniel's expression, the careful control crumbling. He pressed his lips together, blinking rapidly. "She's been drawing all morning," Clara said softly. Pictures of her hero in the baseball cap. She left then, before either of them could say something that would make the moment harder. In the hallway, Marcus stood waiting, his expression carefully neutral. He'd been informed of his pending termination that morning. Ma'am, with respect, hiring him would be a mistake. Why? Because he doesn't have a Secret Service background. Because he doesn't wear $3,000 suits. Because you're making an emotional decision. He saved Lily, and you're grateful, but gratitude isn't a business strategy. Clara turned to face her soon-to-be former security chief fully. Do you know what Daniel did after he was shot? He dragged my daughter to cover, then went back to stop the shooter with a fire extinguisher. A fire extinguisher, Marcus, while you were updating your LinkedIn profile in the parking lot. That's not... You're right about one thing. This is emotional. Everything about protecting my daughter is emotional. The difference is Daniel understands that. He knows that security isn't about protocols and procedures, it's about being willing to bleed for what matters. She walked away, her footsteps echoing in the sterile corridor. Behind her, Marcus said nothing, already calculating his exit package and next move. In room 314, Daniel Hayes stared at a child's drawing and wondered how a Saturday morning errand had transformed into a job offer that would change everything. His arm throbbed with each heartbeat, a rhythmic reminder of choices made in milliseconds that rippled outward in ways he couldn't have imagined. At 2 p.m., Ethan burst into the room like a small tornado, all worried energy and barely contained tears. Dad, are you okay? Mrs. Chen said you were hurt, but you were a hero and saved someone and... Come here, buddy. Ethan carefully climbed onto the bed, mindful of the tubes and wires, and pressed against Daniel's good side. Daniel wrapped his right arm around his son, breathing in the familiar scent of his shampoo, the same brand Sarah had always bought. I'm okay, just a little banged up. Mrs. Chen said you saved a little girl. I helped someone who needed it, like Mom always said we should. Daniel's throat tightened. Yeah, buddy, like Mom always said. They sat in comfortable silence, Ethan playing with the TV remote, while Daniel dozed lightly. The afternoon shift nurse came in to check vitals, smiling at the sight of them together. Your son, she asked. My everything, Daniel replied without thinking, then flushed slightly at the admission. The nurse's smile widened. The woman who was here earlier, Clara Donovan. She's covering all your medical expenses. Private room upgrade too if you want it. I don't need... Dad, Ethan interrupted. Mom always said it's okay to let people help. Remember? When she was sick and people brought food out of the mouths of babes, Sarah had said that usually while Daniel was stubbornly trying to handle everything himself. She'd understood something he was still learning, that accepting help wasn't weakness, but a different kind of strength. That evening, after Ethan had gone home with Mrs. Chen in the hospital had settled into its nighttime rhythms, Daniel found himself staring at the ceiling and replaying the mall scene. Not the violence he'd seen enough violence to last several lifetimes, but the moment after when Clara Donovan had looked at him across the chaos with eyes that saw past the blood and the worn clothes to something deeper. His phone cracked, but functional buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Clara. I wanted to make sure you have my direct line. No pressure about the job, but if you have questions, call anytime. Also, Lily wants you to know she's decided strawberry is better than vanilla. You have excellent taste. Despite himself, Daniel smiled. He typed back carefully with one thumb. Tell her strawberry is the choice of champions. 3 dots appeared immediately. She's laughing. First time since yesterday. Thank you. Daniel set the phone aside and closed his eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. His mind kept circling back to Clara's offer. $150,000 a year. Benefits. Security for Ethan. It was everything he'd dreamed of when he'd first come home from Afghanistan, before reality had crushed those dreams under the weight of Sarah's medical bills and the discovery that combat experience didn't translate to corporate qualifications. But it would mean returning to a world he'd left behind, a world of threat assessments and contingency plans, of constantly scanning crowds and identifying exits. It would mean becoming again the man who could disarm a shooter with a fire extinguisher instead of the man who just wanted to stock shelves and raise his son in peace. The truth was, he'd never really stopped being that man. He still mapped escape routes in grocery stores, still positioned himself with his back to walls, in restaurants still felt his body tense when car backfired. The warehouse job hadn't changed who he was, it had just let him pretend. His phone buzzed again. This time it was a link to a news story. Identity of mall hero revealed decorated veteran working minimum wage. The article included his military photo, young and serious in dress uniform, alongside a grainy still from the mall footage. The contrast was jarring, the soldier he'd been, and the man he'd become separated by years and loss, and the grinding weight of civilian poverty. The comments were already flooding in. Strangers calling him a hero, others questioning why a trained soldier was working in a warehouse, some suggesting the whole thing was staged. The internet doing what it did best, turning human complexity into simple narratives. Another text from Clara. I'm sorry about the media attention. We tried to keep your name out of it. Not your fault, he typed back. I have a PR team that can help manage this if you want. Daniel almost laughed. A PR team. As if his life had suddenly become something requiring management and spin. I just want to keep Ethan out of it. Already done. Any outlet that mentions him gets frozen out of Donovan Tech announcements. It's amazing how quickly editorial decisions change when ad revenue is threatened. There was something ruthlessly protective in that response that Daniel recognized. The same instinct that had made him dive toward Lily was there in Clara's willingness to use her power to shield his son. "Thank you," he typed. "It's the least I can do." But it wasn't, and they both knew it. She owed him nothing beyond the thank you she'd already given. Everything else, the medical bills, the job offer, protecting Ethan from media attention, was a choice. The next morning brought doctors and decisions. The surgeon, an older woman with steady hands and kind eyes, explained that physical therapy would take months. Full recovery was expected, but he'd have residual weakness, maybe some nerve damage. "Will I be able to work?" Daniel asked. "Desk job." "Absolutely. Physical labor might be more challenging." So the warehouse was out regardless. Even if he wanted to go back to lifting boxes and loading trucks, his body had made that choice for him. The bullet had torn through more than muscle, it had severed his last connection to the simple life he'd tried to build. That afternoon, while Ethan was at school and the hospital lunch tray sat untouched on his bedside table, Daniel called the number Clara had given him. She answered on the first ring. "Daniel, how are you feeling?" "Like I need to make a decision." "Ah." A pause. "And?" "Tell me about the job. Really, tell me. Not the sales pitch." Clara was quiet for a moment, and he could hear papers rustling in the background. "Donovan Technologies has 4,200 employees across 6 locations. We develop encryption software for government contracts, which makes us a target for corporate espionage and foreign intelligence services. In the last year, we've had 3 serious security breaches, 2 attempted infiltrations, and 1 kidnapping attempt on a senior executive." Kidnapping. Resolved without injury, but it was close. Too close. Her voice hardened. "Marcus's team is good at looking impressive and checking boxes. They're less good at actual threat prevention. I need someone who understands that real danger doesn't always announce itself with a business card and a visitor's badge." "And you think I can do that?" "I think you've already proven you can. But more than that, I think you understand something Marcus never did, that security isn't about the principal. It's about what the principal represents. Lily isn't just my daughter. She's the future of everything I'm building. Every employee who comes to work knowing their families are safe, every innovation we develop without fear of theft or sabotage, that's what security really protects." Daniel thought about Ethan, about the fear that lived constantly in his chest since Sarah's death, that something would happen to him leaving his son alone. The hours. Flexible within reason, you'd need to be available for major events and traveling occasionally, but I'm a single parent too, Daniel. I understand that our children come first. Our children. The phrase created an unexpected intimacy, a recognition of shared experience that transcended their vastly different circumstances. "Can I start part-time until my arm heals?" "You can start however you need to start. Honestly, just having you review our current protocols would be valuable. Marcus has created systems that look good on paper but have never been tested by someone who's actually faced real threats." Daniel made his decision the same way he'd made it in the mall, instantly, instinctively knowing that hesitation would only make it harder. Okay. I'll take the job." He could hear Clara's smile through the phone. "Thank you. You won't regret this. One condition. Name it. Ethan can never know the salary. He's 8. He doesn't need to know his dad suddenly makes more than the president." Clara laughed, a genuine sound that transformed her from CEO to simply a woman who understood the complexities of raising children in an unequal world. "Deal. Although, for the record, you'll be making less than the president, but more than most senators, so there's that." After she hung up, Daniel lay back against the hospital pillows and tried to imagine it. Director of Corporate Security, a salary that would pay off Sarah's medical debt in 2 years. Ethan, in private school maybe. College savings, the ability to buy strawberry ice cream without checking the bank balance first. It felt surreal, like a dream that would evaporate when the pain medication wore off. But the throb in his arm was real. The child's drawing on his bedside table was real. The job offer from one of the state's most powerful CEOs was apparently real too. That evening, he called his former squad leader from Afghanistan, Jake Morrison, now working security for a defense contractor in Virginia. "Hayes, you magnificent bastard!" Jake's voice boomed through the phone. "Saw you on the news, taking bullets for civilians now." Something like that. Man, that was beautiful. Textbook close protection. You've still got it. Got a job offer out of it. No shit, private security. Corporate. Donovan Technologies. Jake whistled low. That's big leagues, brother. Clara Donovan doesn't mess around. You know her. Know of her. Reputation for being brilliant and ruthless. Turned a failing software company into a defense contracting powerhouse in 5 years. Also heard she's got a thing about loyalty, rewards it better than anyone, punishes betrayal worse than everyone. She seems different than I expected. Different how? Daniel thought about Clara sitting beside his hospital bed in jeans and a sweater, quoting his wife's medical debt down to the dollar, understanding without being told why he needed Ethan to stay innocent of their finances a little longer. Human, he said finally. Well, that's rare in that tax bracket. You taking the job already said yes. Good. You were wasting yourself in that warehouse. Sarah would be proud. The mention of his wife made Daniel's chest tighten. Would she be proud, or would she worry that he was returning to a world that had sent him home with nightmares and hypervigilance? I hope so, he said quietly. She would, Jake insisted. She wanted you safe, yeah, but she also wanted you to be who you are. And who you are is a protector, Danny. Always have been. After the call, Daniel dozed, fitfully waking periodically to check the time. At 3 a.m., his phone lit up with a text from Clara. Can't sleep. Keep thinking about what could have happened. Thank you doesn't feel like enough. He typed back, it's more than enough. Is Lily okay? Nightmares. She's in my bed now, finally asleep. She asked if you could come to her birthday party next month. If she wants me there, I'll be there. She wants to introduce you to her friends as the hero who saved me. Fair warning. I can think of worse introductions. Daniel. Yeah. I'm trusting you with everything that matters to me. I need you to know that. The weight of that trust settled over him like armor, familiar and heavy and somehow right. I know, he typed. I won't let you down. I know you won't. 3 weeks later, Daniel stood in front of Donovan Technologies' glass tower, his left arm still in a sling, but mobile enough to manage. The building rose 40 stories into the November sky, all reflected clouds and architectural ambition. His new ID badge felt foreign in his pocket, the photo taken just yesterday showing a man he barely recognized, clean-shaven, wearing a suit Clara had insisted on buying despite his protests. It's a uniform, she'd said simply. I don't send my soldiers into battle without proper equipment. The lobby was a cathedral of marble and modern art, the kind of space designed to make visitors feel simultaneously impressed and insignificant. Daniel's worn boots, he'd refused new shoes needing something familiar, clicked against the polished floor as he approached the security desk. Mr. Hayes, the guard. A young man named Tommy straightened immediately. Miss Donovan is expecting you. Executive elevator to the 40th floor. Everyone knew who he was. The mall hero. The man who'd saved the boss's daughter. Daniel could feel eyes tracking him across the lobby, whispers following in his wake like ripples on water. He kept his expression neutral, a skill learned in countless forward operating bases where showing weakness invited problems. The executive elevator was all brushed steel and subtle luxury rising smoothly enough that his recovering arm didn't protest. When the doors opened, he stepped into a world he'd only seen in movies, floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a view of the entire city furniture that cost more than his annual warehouse salary, and a hushed atmosphere that spoke of serious money and serious power. Marcus Webb stood near the reception desk, his face a professional mask that didn't quite hide his resentment. He was a big man, built like a former linebacker, who'd kept most of his muscle with silver threading through dark hair that was styled with military precision. Hayes, he said, the single word carrying volumes of disapproval. Marcus. Miss Donovan asked me to brief you on current protocols before my transition. The way he said transition suggested he'd rather be saying execution, though I'm not sure what a warehouse worker could understand about executive protection. Daniel felt the familiar pre-combat calm settle over him, the state where insults became irrelevant background noise. I'm a quick learner. We'll see. Marcus turned toward a conference room, clearly expecting Daniel to follow like a subordinate. We have 42 active security personnel, not counting administrative support. 3 shifts covering 24/7 protection for Miss Donovan and her daughter, plus response teams for the 6 facilities. The conference room table was covered with binders, protocols, staff files, the paper skeleton of a security operation that looked perfect from the outside. Daniel picked up the nearest binder, flipping through pages of procedures that read like someone had copied them from a textbook. "Your response time at the mall," Daniel said quietly. "What was it?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "The situation was already resolved when we arrived." "That's not what I asked. 4 minutes from notification to arrival at scene." 4 minutes. Daniel set down the binder. "In 4 minutes, 7 people were shot, 1 dead. If I hadn't been there, Lily Donovan would have been number 8. "You think you're some kind of hero?" Marcus stepped closer, using his size advantage to loom. "You got lucky. Right place, right time, right set of reflexes. That doesn't make you qualified to run security for a Fortune 500 company." "You're right," Daniel said, not backing down despite the height difference. "It doesn't, but 8 years in Afghanistan does. Protecting State Department officials in Kandahar does. Keeping senators alive during fact-finding missions to active war zones does." He paused, letting each qualification land. "What qualifies you, Marcus, besides the Secret Service certificate on your wall from 20 years ago?" The bigger man's face flushed dark red. "I've kept Clara Donovan safe for 3 years without a single incident." "No, you've been present for 3 years while she happened to stay safe. There's a difference." Before Marcus could respond, the conference room door opened. Clara entered, dressed in a black suit that probably cost more than most people's cars, her presence immediately shifting the room's dynamic. Both men straightened unconsciously. "Gentlemen," she said, though her tone suggested she found them anything but. "I can hear you from my office. Marcus, that will be all." "Ma'am, I haven't finished the briefing." "Yes, you have." Her voice carried the kind of finality that ended board meetings and hostile takeovers. "Your severance package is being processed. Your company equipment has been collected. Thank you for your service." Marcus looked like he wanted to argue, but 3 years of working for Clara Donovan had taught him when battles were already lost. He gave a stiff nod and left his footsteps heavy with injured pride. Clara waited until the elevator chimed before turning to Daniel. "I apologize for that. Marcus is taking his termination less gracefully than I'd hoped." "He's not wrong," Daniel said. "I don't know anything about corporate security. But you know about keeping people alive. The corporate part can be learned. The instinct to step between danger and the innocent that can't be taught." She moved to the window, looking out at the city below. "Do you know why I really fired Marcus? Because he failed at the mall. Because when I asked him to review the footage to analyze what went wrong, do you know what he said? He said the failure was mine, that I shouldn't have allowed Lily to be in a public space without full security detail, that a proper principal wouldn't have exposed herself to that risk." Daniel felt anger rise in his chest, hot and familiar. "He blamed you for taking your daughter for ice cream." He saw Lily as a liability to be managed rather than a child to be protected. That fundamental misunderstanding of priority makes him dangerous. She turned from the window. "You have a son. You understand that we don't lock our children in towers to keep them safe. We teach them to live while doing everything we can to protect that life." "Speaking of which," Daniel said, "I need to pick up Ethan at 4, school science fair." "Of course. Actually, that brings up something I wanted to discuss. Your apartment is fine." Daniel interrupted, knowing where this was going. "Is in a building with 3 code violations and a robbery last month. You researched my building. I research everything. It's how I've survived in this business." She pulled out a tablet, swiping to bring up images. "There's a house in Westfield Heights. 4 bedrooms, good school district, 15 minutes from here. The company maintains it for relocating executives." Daniel looked at the images, a 2-story colonial with an actual yard, the kind of place he and Sarah had dreamed about before the diagnosis changed everything. "I can't afford..." "It's part of your compensation package, housing allowance for senior executives." "I'm not a senior executive. I'm a security guard with a fancy title." Clara's expression shifted, something fierce flickering in her eyes. "No, you're the director of corporate security for a company that handles classified defense contracts. You're responsible for the safety of 4,000 employees and billions in intellectual property. You're not a security guard, Daniel. Stop thinking like one. Before he could respond, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, frowning. Speaking of security issues, we have a problem. Someone's been probing our network defenses. Third attempt this week. Hackers. More sophisticated than that. Pattern suggests foreign intelligence, probably Chinese or Russian. She pulled up data on the conference room screen. Marcus insisted it was routine, nothing to worry about. Daniel studied the attack patterns, his mind shifting into tactical mode. It's not routine. They're testing response times, mapping your defensive architecture. This is reconnaissance for something bigger. That's what I thought. Clara watched him analyze the data. What would you do? First, assume they've already gotten something. Run a full audit check for any data that's been accessed unusually. Second, honeypot trap. Give them something to find that looks valuable but lets us track them. Third, physical security review. Cyber attacks are often combined with human intelligence operations. Someone inside could be helping them. Clara smiled, the first genuine one he'd seen from her in their professional setting. Marcus's response was to buy more firewall software. Marcus thinks like a bodyguard. This requires thinking like a soldier. Which is why I hired you. She closed the tablet. I've scheduled a meeting with the senior staff tomorrow. You'll need to present your initial assessment and recommendations. Tomorrow I've been here exactly 1 hour. And you've already identified more actual threats than Marcus did in 3 years. Trust your instincts, Daniel. They've been right so far. Her phone buzzed again. This time her expression softened. It's Lily. She wants to know if you're coming to dinner Sunday. I don't want to intrude. You saved her life. You're not intruding, you're family. She paused, seeming to realize what she'd said. I mean, Lily sees you as... she's attached to you. Just Lily. The question hung between them, loaded with implications neither was ready to explore. Clara was his boss now, a billionaire CEO who lived in a different universe from his 2-bedroom apartment and bargain groceries. But she was also the woman who'd texted him at 3 a.m., unable to sleep from fear of what might have been. We should discuss the staff files, Clara said, redirecting with practiced ease. There are concerns about several employees that Marcus dismissed, but I think warrant investigation. They spent the next 2 hours reviewing personnel, Daniel taking notes, and asking questions that revealed how surface-level Marcus's security had been. No background checks on contractors, no monitoring of unusual access patterns, no psychological evaluations for personnel with critical access. It was security theater designed to look impressive while missing fundamental vulnerabilities. Jesus, Daniel muttered, reading about a janitor with building-wide access who'd never been properly vetted. This is worse than Afghanistan. At least there we knew everyone was potentially hostile. Can you fix it? I can fix it, but people won't like it. Real security is inconvenient. It slows things down, asks uncomfortable questions. I don't pay people to like me. I pay them to do their jobs. Your job is to keep us safe. Do whatever you need to do. At 3:45, Daniel stood to leave. I need to get Ethan. Take the company car, Clara offered. Driver's waiting downstairs. Thanks, but I've got my Honda. The one with the broken tail light and the engine that sounds like it's dying. You researched my car too. I noticed it in the hospital parking lot. Hard to miss the duct tape holding the bumper on. Daniel felt heat rise in his face. It runs. Daniel. Her voice softened. You're not in survival mode anymore. You have a real job with real compensation. It's okay to accept that. It's been 3 weeks. This could all, disappear? Do you think I make hasty decisions? Do you think offering you this position was some impulse born of gratitude? She moved closer, and he could smell her perfume, something subtle and expensive. I've built this company by recognizing talent and securing it. You're not charity, Daniel. You're an investment. The intensity in her eyes made him look away. I should go. Sunday dinner, she said. 6 o'clock. Lily will be devastated if you don't come. Just Lily, he asked again, echoing their earlier moment. This time she smiled. Bring Ethan. The boys can play while we discuss security concerns. Daniel left the building feeling like he'd been through another kind of combat one where the weapons were words and looks where victory conditions remained unclear. The Honda started on the third try, coughing black smoke that made the valet step back in alarm. Tomorrow, he'd look at new cars. Maybe. The elementary school was a cheerful chaos of children and science projects the gymnasium transformed into a maze of cardboard presentations and volcanic demonstrations. Daniel found Ethan standing proudly beside a poster about electromagnets his project held together with tape and hope, but his enthusiasm undimmed. Dad, look. It really works. Ethan demonstrated his creation, a small motor powered by copper coils and magnets. Mrs. Patterson says it's very impressive for third grade. It's amazing, buddy. Daniel knelt beside his son, ignoring the pull in his healing arm. You did this all yourself. Well, Mrs. Chen helped a little, but I did the research. Did you know that electromagnets are in everything? Cars, computers, even doorbells. As Ethan explained his project with the intensity only an 8-year-old could muster, Daniel noticed other parents giving him sidelong glances. Some recognized him from the news coverage whispering behind hands about the mall hero. Others simply saw what they'd always seen: a single father in worn jeans among the suburban prosperity, out of place in the sea of two-parent families and SUVs. Is your arm better? Ethan asked, suddenly interrupting his own explanation about magnetic fields. Getting there. Tommy's mom said you were brave, that you saved someone. Daniel had tried to shield Ethan from the details, but kids talked. I helped someone who needed it. Like Mom would have wanted. Yeah, buddy, like Mom would have wanted. They stayed until the fair ended, Ethan winning a participation ribbon that he clutched like Olympic gold. On the drive home, the Honda's engine making increasingly concerning noises, Ethan chattered about his next project idea, something involving solar panels and tiny motors. That sounds expensive, Daniel said carefully. Maybe I could get a job. Tommy delivers newspapers and makes $5 a week. The innocence of it, thinking $5 could buy solar panels, made Daniel's chest ache. Tomorrow he'd have his first real paycheck from Donovan Technologies. More money than he'd ever seen at once. Enough to buy solar panels and electromagnets and whatever else Ethan's curious mind wanted to explore. But tonight they'd have spaghetti from a box and watch cartoons on their secondhand TV, and that would be enough because they were together. His phone buzzed with a text from Clara. How was the science fair? He typed back one-handed while waiting at a red light. Electromagnets are apparently in everything. I've been informed of this repeatedly. Lily's current obsession is butterflies. I now know more about metamorphosis than any adult should. The things we do for our kids. The things we do? There was something intimate about texting her while driving home to his shabby apartment, like they were just two single parents navigating the impossibility of raising children alone. Not CEO and security director, not billionaire and working class, just Clara and Daniel bound by the shared experience of loving children more than life itself. That night, after Ethan was asleep, Daniel sat at his laptop researching Donovan Technologies' security vulnerabilities. The more he dug, the more problems he found. It wasn't just Marcus's incompetence. It was systematic, like someone had deliberately created gaps in coverage. Either Marcus was worse at his job than anyone realized, or something else was going on. He made notes mapping vulnerabilities like he'd once mapped insurgent networks in Kandahar. By 2 a.m., he had 20 pages of observations and recommendations. His arm throbbed, reminding him he was supposed to be taking it easy, but this felt important, critical even. His phone rang, startling him. Clara's name appeared on the screen. You're awake, she said without preamble. So are you. I don't sleep much. Haven't since the divorce. You haven't since Sarah. Silence stretched between them, comfortable somehow. I've been reviewing Marcus's files, Daniel said. There's something wrong here. The gaps in security, they're too consistent to be accidental. You think Marcus was compromised? I think someone was feeding information to whoever's probing your networks. Maybe Marcus, maybe someone else, but definitely someone inside. Clara was quiet for a moment. Can you prove it? Give me a few days. Daniel, if you're right, this is bigger than just corporate espionage. We have classified defense contracts. This could be treason. I know. Be careful. If someone inside is compromised and they know you're investigating, I've dealt with worse threats than corporate spies. Have you in Afghanistan you knew who the enemy was? Here they wear suits and smile while planning your destruction. Sounds like you're speaking from experience. My ex-husband tried to take the company during the divorce, said I was an unfit mother too focused on work. The man who'd built his career on my father's connection suddenly discovered feminism when it meant potentially getting half my assets. Bitterness crept into her voice. I learned that the most dangerous enemies are the ones who know your vulnerabilities. What happened? I won. I always win. But it cost me things I can't get back: time with Lily, trust in people, the ability to sleep without wondering who's planning to destroy me next. Daniel understood that kind of hypervigilance, the exhausting state of constant threat assessment. Is that why you hired me, because I'm too new to be compromised? Partly. But mostly because when everyone else ran from danger, you ran toward it. That's rare, Daniel, rarer than you might think. They talked until 3 a.m. conversation, drifting from security concerns to their children, from corporate threats to favorite movies. It was strange and comfortable and dangerous in a way that had nothing to do with physical threats. When Daniel finally slept, he dreamed not of Afghanistan or the mall shooting, but of Clara's voice in the darkness, admitting fears to a man she'd known for 3 weeks that she'd probably never told anyone else. The next morning came too soon, Ethan bouncing on his bed at 6 a.m., excited about something involving breakfast and cartoons. Daniel made pancakes from a mix, letting Ethan pour syrup until his plate looked like a sugar lake, then drove him to school in the coughing Honda. "Dad," Ethan said as they pulled up to the building, "are we poor?" The question hit like a physical blow. "Why do you ask that, buddy?" "Tommy's mom said we were. She said you were a hero but still poor, and that wasn't fair." Daniel gripped the steering wheel, searching for the right words. "We've had some tough times, but being poor doesn't make us less than anyone else." "I know that. Mom said money doesn't make people good or bad, but it would be nice to not worry, right?" "Yeah, buddy, it would be nice." "Maybe your new job will help." Daniel had told him about the job, but not the details, certainly not the salary. "Maybe it will." After dropping Ethan off, Daniel drove to Donovan Technologies, the Honda, seeming even more out of place in the executive parking garage among the Teslas and BMWs. He took the employee elevator this time, avoiding the lobby where people stared and whispered. The security office was on the 38th floor, a suite of rooms with monitors and communication equipment that Marcus had turned into his kingdom. Daniel's new assistant, a sharp-eyed woman named Janet, who'd clearly been warned about him, handed him a stack of messages and a schedule that made his head spin. "Senior staff meeting at 9, she said crisply. "Department heads at 10. Lunch with Miss Donovan at noon. Facility inspection at 2. Conference call with the Pentagon at 3 about clearance protocols." The Pentagon. "We handle classified contracts, Mr. Hayes. The Defense Department likes to be kept informed about security changes." Daniel stared at the schedule, feeling like he'd jumped into deep water without checking for sharks. In the Army, he'd had years of training before taking on this level of responsibility. Here, he had instinct and Clara's faith, and he wasn't sure either was enough. The senior staff meeting was held in a boardroom that could have housed his entire apartment. 12 executives sat around a table that gleamed like black ice, their faces ranging from curious to openly hostile. These were people who'd worked with Marcus, who saw Daniel as an interloper, a feel-good hire made from misplaced gratitude. Clara introduced him with perfect professional distance, no hint of their late-night conversations. "Mr. Hayes comes to us with extensive military experience in threat assessment and protective operations. He'll be implementing new security protocols over the coming weeks." "With respect," said a man Daniel recognized as the CFO, Thomas Wright. Marcus had established systems that worked well for 3 years. "Why fix what isn't broken?" "Because," Daniel said, standing to address the room, "your systems are not just broken, they're compromised." The room erupted in protests and questions. Daniel raised his hand for silence, then pulled up his presentation on the main screen, 20 pages condensed into brutal efficiency. "In the last 6 months, you've had 47 unauthorized access attempts on your servers." Marcus reported 3. You've had employees using the same passwords for 5 years. Marcus never required changes. You have contractors with building access who've never been background checked. Marcus signed off on all of them. He clicked through slides showing vulnerability after vulnerability, each one documented and verified. The executive's expressions shifted from skepticism to alarm. "This is speculation," Wright protested. "You can't prove." "Actually, I can." Daniel pulled up another screen. "Last night, someone accessed the system using Marcus's credentials. Marcus, who was terminated yesterday and should have had his access revoked immediately. Either your IT department is incompetent or someone wanted those credentials active." Clara leaned forward. "What did they access?" "Personnel files, specifically mine." Daniel let that sink in. "Someone wanted to know about your new security director. They downloaded my military records, my financial history, even my son's school records." "That's a violation of," someone started. "It's corporate espionage at minimum, treason at worst, if they're feeding information to foreign entities." Daniel looked at each executive in turn. "One of you or someone in your departments is compromised. Until I determine who everyone is suspect." "This is outrageous," Wright stood up. "You can't treat us like criminals." "Sit down, Thomas," Clara said quietly. "Mr. Hayes is doing exactly what I hired him to do." "You hired him because he saved Lily. That doesn't make him qualified to—" "I hired him because he's right." Clara's voice could have frozen flame. "Every vulnerability he's identified is real. Every breach he's found happened under our watch. We've been lucky, not secure. That ends now." Daniel spent the rest of the meeting outlining new protocols, mandatory password changes, biometric scanning for secure areas, regular polygraph tests for employees with classified access, psychological evaluations for anyone showing unusual behavior patterns. It was invasive and uncomfortable and absolutely necessary. "This will cost millions," Wright protested. "A security breach will cost billions," Daniel countered. "Ask Lockheed how much the F-35 hack cost them." By the time the meeting ended, Daniel had made 12 enemies and 0 friends. But Clara nodded approval as the executives filed out, and that was what mattered. "Wright's going to be a problem," she said when they were alone. "Wright's already a problem. He accessed the personnel system 16 times last month. That's unusual for a CFO." "You think he's the leak?" "I think he's worth watching, but it could be anyone. That's why I need full access emails, phone records, financial transactions. Everything. That's a significant privacy invasion. You hired me to keep your company safe. I can't do that with one hand tied behind my back." Clara studied him for a long moment. "Do it. But Daniel, be careful. If someone realizes you're hunting them, they'll come after me. I'm counting on it." "That's not reassuring." "It's not meant to be. This is what I do, Clara. I make myself a target so others don't have to be." She looked like she wanted to argue, but her assistant knocked, announcing her next meeting. As Daniel turned to leave, Clara called after him. "Sunday dinner, don't forget." "I won't." Walking back to his office, Daniel felt the familiar sensation of being watched. He'd felt it in Afghanistan, that prickle on the back of the neck that meant someone had you in their sights. Someone in this building was tracking his movements, reporting to whoever was trying to penetrate Donovan Technologies' defenses. Good, he thought. Let them watch, let them worry, let them make a mistake. In his office, Janet had left more files, 5 years of security reports, all signed by Marcus, all showing perfect safety records that Daniel now knew were fiction. He settled in to read his injured arm protesting the angle of his desk chair. By evening, he'd identified 17 more vulnerabilities and 3 employees whose access patterns suggested they were doing something they shouldn't be. One was Wright. One was a programmer in the development department. The third made Daniel's blood run cold. It was someone in Clara's personal assistant pool. Someone with access to her schedule, her communications, her daughter's school information. He called Clara immediately. "Don't react," he said as soon as she answered. "Just listen. Is Miranda Chen with you?" "Yes, we're reviewing tomorrow's schedule." "Ask her to step out. Make an excuse." There was a pause. Then Clara's voice, professional and calm. "Miranda, could you check with catering about tomorrow's board lunch? I want to make sure they have the dietary restrictions correct." Daniel heard footsteps, a door closing. "What's going on?" Clara's voice was tight with control. "Miranda's been accessing Lily's school records 3 times in the last week. There's no legitimate reason for that. Maybe she was arranging pickup schedules. At 2 a.m. from her home computer. Silence. Clara, I need you to think. Has Miranda asked any unusual questions lately? Shown interest in Lily beyond what's normal? She asked if Lily had recovered from the mall incident, said she looked tired, offered to pick her up from school a few times when I was in meetings. Has she been alone with Lily recently? No, not since the mall. Good. Don't let her be. Act normal tomorrow, but keep Miranda at a distance. I'm going to dig deeper tonight. Daniel, if she's a threat to Lily. We don't know that yet. Could be innocent, but until we're sure, assume everyone is a potential threat. Everyone. Everyone except me. Why should I trust you? The question wasn't accusatory, just curious. You've been here less than a week. Because I already took a bullet for your daughter. If I wanted to hurt either of you, I had the perfect opportunity at the mall. Unless this is a long game, save Lily to gain access to the company. Daniel laughed, short and humorless. Clara, if I was playing a long game, I wouldn't be living in a rat-infested apartment driving a car held together with duct tape. I'm many things, but I'm not that good an actor. The apartment has rats. Had. Ethan named one of them Fred before I could get rid of it. Despite the tension, Clara laughed. Only your son would name a rat. He has too much empathy, gets it from his mother. And from his father, who can't see a child in danger without acting. They were quiet for a moment, the weight of trust and suspicion balanced on a knife's edge. I'll be careful with Miranda, Clara said finally. But Daniel, find out what's happening. Fast. After hanging up, Daniel dove deep into Miranda Chen's digital footprint, not Mrs. Chen, who watched Ethan, thank God for that small mercy, but a different Chen, one whose background was almost too perfect. Stanford MBA, previous experience at 3 Fortune 500 companies, glowing recommendations from all of them. Too perfect. Daniel had seen covers like this before in Afghanistan, identities built carefully over years designed to pass casual scrutiny. But there were always tells if you knew where to look, and Daniel knew. He found it at 11 p.m., a gap in her employment history 6 months in 2019 that were explained as personal travel, but corresponded with a spike in cyber attacks on defense contractors. Could be coincidence, or it could be someone's operative taking a break between assignments. His phone buzzed. Ethan texting from Mrs. Chen's phone. Dad, when are you coming home? Guilt washed over him. He'd been so focused on the hunt that he'd forgotten his son was waiting. On my way, buddy. He locked his files, encrypted his notes, and headed for the parking garage. The Honda started on the first try, a minor miracle, and he made it to Mrs. Chen's apartment in 20 minutes. I'm sorry, he said, scooping Ethan into a hug. Work ran late. It's okay, Ethan said, though his voice suggested it wasn't entirely. Mrs. Chen made dumplings. Dumplings sound amazing. They walked home together, Ethan chattering about school, while Daniel scanned the darkness, old habits demanding vigilance. Someone had accessed his son's school records. Someone was interested in his vulnerabilities. That night after Ethan was asleep, Daniel sat by his son's bed and watched him breathe. In Afghanistan, he'd protected strangers because it was his job. Now he was protecting Clara and Lily because why? Because it was his job. Because Clara trusted him. Or because somewhere in the last 3 weeks they'd become more than clients to protect his phone, lit up with a text from Clara. Can't sleep. Knowing Miranda might be a threat makes me want to pull Lily out of school and lock her in her room forever. That's not living, he typed back. That's just existing. Says the man who made me suspect everyone. Suspicion keeps you alive, but you're right, it's no way to live. We'll figure this out. We. Sunday arrived with unseasonable warmth for November, the kind of day that made Daniel second-guess his decision to wear his only good jacket. Ethan had insisted on bringing his electromagnetic project to show Lily carrying it like precious cargo as they drove through increasingly affluent neighborhoods toward Clara's estate. Dad, are these all single houses? Ethan pressed his nose against the Honda's window, watching mansions roll by like monuments to another world. Yeah, buddy. But they're so big. How many families live in each one? Usually just one.
Ethan processed this information with 8-year-old logic. That seems lonely. Out of the mouths of babes, Daniel thought turning into Clara's driveway. The Georgian mansion rose before them like something from a movie, all perfect symmetry and manicured lawns. The Honda wheezed to a stop, looking desperately out of place among the landscape perfection.
Before Daniel could second-guess coming, the front door burst open and Lily ran out, blonde pigtails flying. "Mr. Daniel, you came, She stopped just short of hugging him, suddenly shy. Daniel knelt to her level, his healing arm protesting slightly. "I promised, didn't I?" "Mommy said you always keep promises. Is that true?" "I try to." "This is Ethan," Daniel said, guiding his son forward. "Ethan, this is Lily." "You're the girl my dad saved," Ethan said with characteristic directness. "Your dad's a hero," Lily said solemnly. "Want to see my butterfly collection?" And just like that, the two children ran off together, Ethan's project abandoned on the porch in favor of new friendship. Daniel watched them go, something easing in his chest. Kids had a way of making everything simple. They make it look easy. He turned to find Clara in the doorway, dressed in jeans and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than his rent, but somehow made her look approachable human. The CEO armor was gone, leaving just a mother watching her daughter laugh. "Kids don't know they're supposed to be different," Daniel said. "No, they don't." She studied him for a moment. "How's the arm?" "Better every day." "Good. Come in. I made dinner." "You cook." "I'm full of surprises." The inside of the house was less imposing than he'd expected, decorated with a warmth that spoke of actual living rather than magazine shoots. Children's artwork adorned expensive walls. Toys scattered across Persian rugs. It was a home that happened to be a mansion rather than a mansion pretending to be a home. The kitchen was enormous but cozy, filled with the smell of roasting chicken and something that might have been homemade bread. Clara moved around the space with easy familiarity, checking pots and adjusting temperatures. "I can help," Daniel offered. "You can sit and keep me company. Doctor's orders about that arm." He sat at the kitchen island watching her work. "You really did cook." "Every Sunday. It's the one normal thing I insist on. No staff, no catering, just me and Lily, and now you and Ethan apparently. We don't want to intrude on your tradition." "Daniel." She turned from the stove. "Stop. You're not intruding. You're invited. There's a difference." Through the window, he could see the children in the backyard, Ethan helping Lily catch something in a jar. Their laughter carried on the warm air, bright and uncomplicated. "I've been thinking about Miranda," Clara said, her voice dropping. "She's been with me for 2 years. Helped plan Lily's birthday parties, stayed late when I needed her. How do I reconcile that with what you found? People aren't always what they seem. Sometimes they're exactly what they seem for years until they're activated." "Activated? Like she's some kind of sleeper agent?" "Maybe. Or maybe she's just someone who made a deal with the wrong people. Debt blackmail threats. There are lots of ways to compromise someone." Clara pulled the chicken from the oven, golden and perfect. "I hate this, suspecting everyone. It's temporary. Once we identify the threat, you can go back to trusting people. Once you know betrayal is possible, can you ever really trust again?" Daniel thought about Sarah, how she'd trusted doctors who'd missed the early signs, trusted treatments that hadn't worked, trusted a universe that had failed her anyway. "I don't know, but I know you can't live without trying." The children burst through the back door, Ethan holding the jar triumphantly. "We caught a grasshopper. Lily says we can keep him until after dinner, then let him go." "His name is George," Lily announced. "George the grasshopper." "Of course it is," Clara said, smiling. "Wash your hands, both of you. Dinner's ready." They ate in the casual dining room. Apparently there was also a formal one that seated 20 conversation flowing easily around bites of perfectly roasted chicken. Ethan explained his electromagnetic project while Lily listened with genuine interest. Clara asked questions that showed she understood the science. Daniel found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't in years. "Mom was a teacher," Ethan was saying. "She said science was like magic except real." "Your mom sounds smart," Clara said gently. "She was. Dad says I get my brain from her."
And your courage from him, Lily added matter-of-factly. Ethan beamed at this assessment while Daniel felt his throat tighten. Clara caught his eye across the table, a moment of shared understanding between single parents navigating the minefield of deceased spouses. After dinner, the children released George the Grasshopper with great ceremony, then settled in the living room with a movie. Daniel and Clara retreated to her study, a wood-paneled room lined with books and tactical brilliance. "I've been thinking about our problem," she said, pouring them both coffee from a service that looked antique. "If Miranda is compromised, we can use that. Feed her false information. Better, feed her true information that seems false. Make whoever she's reporting to doubt their own intelligence." Daniel smiled. "You're devious." "I'm a CEO. It's basically the same thing." She pulled out a laptop. "I had it give me backdoor access to Miranda's computer. Completely illegal, by the way. I won't tell if you won't." They spent the next hour going through Miranda's files, finding nothing obvious but several things that didn't quite fit. Emails deleted but recoverable from the server cache, calendar entries that didn't match Clara's actual schedule, and then buried in a folder labeled recipes. They found it. "These are blueprints," Daniel said, recognizing the technical drawings immediately. "Your R&D facility. That's our most secure building. Biometric scanners, armed guards, the works. Someone's planning a physical breach." Daniel studied the plans, his tactical mind already seeing the vulnerabilities. These annotations, someone's marked the shift changes, the camera blind spots. "Miranda doesn't have access to this information." "No, but Marcus did." They looked at each other, the pieces falling into place. Marcus and Miranda working together or for the same employer, the security chief providing intelligence while the assistant stayed close to the principal. "We need to move fast," Daniel said. "If they know Marcus is out, they'll accelerate their timeline." Clara was already typing. "I can have the FBI here in an hour." "No, not yet. We don't know how deep this goes. FBI involvement means reports, investigations, people asking questions. Whoever's behind this will disappear into the smoke." "Then what do you suggest? We let them come." Clara stared at him. "You want to use my company as bait. I want to control the engagement. Right now they have the initiative. They choose when and where to strike. But if we make them think they're running out of time, force them to move before they're ready, we can catch them in the act." Clara's eyes lit up with understanding. "But that's dangerous. If something goes wrong, I won't let anything happen to you or Lily." "What about you?" "I'm expendable." The word hung between them like a challenge. Clara set down her coffee cup with deliberate precision. "No," she said quietly. "You're not." "Clara, you have a son who needs you. You have—" She stopped, seeming to catch herself. "You're not expendable, Daniel. Not to Ethan and not to this company." The weight of what she hadn't said filled the room. Daniel wanted to reach across the space between them to acknowledge what was building beneath the professional relationship. But the sound of children's laughter from the living room reminded him of all the reasons he couldn't. "Tomorrow," he said instead, "we feed Miranda information about a security system upgrade scheduled for Friday night. Make it seem like the R&D facility will be vulnerable during the transition. And when they come, I'll be waiting." Clara looked like she wanted to argue, but her phone buzzed with an incoming message. She glanced at it, frowning. "Speaking of tomorrow, there's something else. The board is calling an emergency meeting. Wright's been stirring up concerns about the security changes. He's moving fast, too fast. It feels like desperation. Maybe because he knows we're on to him." Daniel stood suddenly aware of how late it had gotten. "I should get Ethan home." "Stay." The word seemed to surprise them both. Clara flushed slightly. "I mean, it's late and the kids are having fun. We have guest rooms, plenty of space." "Clara, as friends, or as security consultant and client if that makes you more comfortable. But it's nice having another adult here. Having the kids play together. It feels normal. I was going to say real." Daniel understood. The mansion could feel like a beautiful prison, all that space emphasizing absence rather than presence. His apartment was cramped and worn, but at least the walls were close enough to hear Ethan breathing at night. "Okay," he said, "we'll stay." Clara's smile transformed her face, years of corporate armor falling away. I'll get the guest room ready. They found the children asleep on the couch, the movie still playing. Ethan was curled against one corner, Lily against the other. George the grasshopper's jar sitting empty between them with a note in crayon. We let him go early so he could find his family, E and L. They're good kids, Clara whispered.
Yeah, they are.
They carried the children upstairs. Daniel following Clara through hallways lined with family photos, Lily as a baby. Clara's wedding, he tried not to look too closely at that one generations of Donovans who'd built the fortune Clara now commanded. The guest room was bigger than Daniel's entire apartment, with a bathroom that belonged in a hotel. Ethan stirred slightly as Daniel tucked him in, mumbling something about electromagnets before settling back into sleep. There are clothes in the dresser, Clara said from the doorway. My ex left them should fit well enough. Thank you. Daniel. She paused, silhouetted in the hallway light. What you said about being expendable. Promise me you won't do anything stupidly heroic. I can't promise that. Why not? Because protecting people is what I do. It's who I am. You knew that when you hired me. She was quiet for a long moment. Yes, I did. After she left, Daniel sat in the unfamiliar luxury of the guest room, listening to the house settle around him. Somewhere down the hall, Clara was probably lying awake too, running through scenarios and contingencies. They were similar that way, both incapable of turning off the vigilance that kept their children safe. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, "You're making a mistake." Daniel's blood chilled. He typed back, "Who is this?" "Someone who knows what you're walking into. Donovan Tech isn't the target. Clara is." "Why should I trust you?" "Because I know about Sarah, about the medical bills, about how desperately you need this job. Walk away, Hayes. Take your son and disappear. What's coming isn't worth dying for." Daniel stared at the message, mind racing. Someone was trying to warn him off, which meant his investigation was hitting close to home. But the mention of Sarah, the implied threat to Ethan, that changed things. He forwarded the message to his old Army contact, Jake, with a simple note, "Trace this." Then he did what he'd learned to do in Afghanistan when surrounded by unknown threats. He prepared for war. Morning came too soon, preceded by Ethan bouncing on the guest bed with enthusiasm that suggested he'd forgotten they weren't at home. Dad, Lily's mom made pancakes, real ones, not from a box. Daniel caught his son mid-bounce. "Easy, buddy. Remember, we're guests here. Lily says we can come back next Sunday. Can we?" The hope in his son's voice was heartbreaking. How long since Ethan had a friend his own age? How long since they'd had a morning that felt like a family? We'll see. They found Clara and Lily in the kitchen, still in pajamas, flour dusting every surface. Lily was standing on a stool, carefully pouring batter onto a griddle while Clara supervised. "Ethan, I'm making butterfly pancakes. See you make circles, then add smaller circles for wings." "That's so cool, can I try?" Daniel met Clara's eyes over the children's heads. She looked softer in the morning light, younger, like the woman she might have been if life had taken different turns. "Sleep well?" she asked. "Well enough." He showed her his phone, the threatening message still on the screen. Her expression tightened, but she kept her voice light for the children's sake. "Interesting. We should discuss that over coffee." They maintained the pretense of a normal morning while the children made increasingly elaborate pancake shapes. But Daniel could see Clara's mind working, processing the new threat, even as she helped Lily flip a particularly ambitious butterfly. After breakfast, while the children played in the backyard, Daniel and Clara reconvened in her study. "Someone's scared," she said immediately. "Scared enough to threaten you directly. Or warn me." The tone was more warning than threat. Same difference. "Someone knows we're investigating and wants you to stop." She pulled up her laptop. "I've been thinking about the timeline. Marcus was terminated Thursday. Miranda accessed Lily's records Friday night. The threatening message came Sunday. They're scrambling, which makes them dangerous. Or sloppy." Clara's fingers flew across the keyboard. "I'm moving the security upgrade story to tomorrow night instead of Friday. Let's see how quickly they react." Daniel's phone rang. Jake calling back. "That number traces to a burner phone, but I got a location ping. Downtown Financial District. Mean anything? Daniel looked at Clara. Wright's office is downtown. So are about 1,000 other offices, Jake pointed out. But here's the interesting part. The phone was purchased with a credit card linked to a shell company. That shell company has ties to a Chinese investment firm that's been suspected of corporate espionage for years. Send me everything you have. Already in your email, and Danny, watch your six. These aren't amateurs. After Jake hung up, Daniel found Clara staring at him with an expression he couldn't read. You have military intelligence contacts investigating this. I have friends who owe me favors. That's not what I'm concerned about. If Chinese intelligence is involved, this is beyond corporate security. This is national security. All the more reason to handle it quietly. FBI involvement means congressional hearings, media attention, your stock price crashing. We can end this without any of that. Or we could all end up dead. Not on my watch. Clara laughed, but there was no humor in it. You can't protect everyone, Daniel. Despite what happened at the mall, you're not actually bulletproof. I don't need to be bulletproof. I just need to be faster than they expect. That afternoon, Daniel took Ethan home to get school clothes while Clara prepared for her board meeting. The apartment looked even shabbier after a night in Clara's guest room. Water stains on the ceiling, more prominent. The smell of mildew, more noticeable. Dad, Ethan said while packing his backpack, why don't we live somewhere nice like Lily's house? We live somewhere that's ours. That makes it nice. But wouldn't it be better if it was ours and nice? Daniel couldn't argue with 8-year-old logic. Maybe someday, buddy. Maybe with your new job. Maybe. As they drove back to drop Ethan at school, Mrs. Chen would pick him up later. Daniel noticed a car following them. Black sedan government plates keeping perfect distance. Not a threat, but a watcher. Someone wanted him to know he was being observed. He dropped Ethan at school with an extra long hug, then drove to Donovan Technologies, the sedan still maintaining its distance. In the parking garage, Daniel got out and walked directly to the sedan, knocking on the driver's window. It rolled down to reveal a young woman with federal agent written all over her. Can I help you? Daniel asked pleasantly. Mr. Hayes, Agent Sarah Foster, FBI. We understand you've been investigating potential espionage at Donovan Technologies. I'm the security director. Investigating is my job. We'd like to cooperate with your investigation. I'll keep that in mind. Mr. Hayes, if foreign intelligence services are attempting to steal classified information, then I'll handle it and report to the proper authorities when I have evidence. Until then, I'm just a security guard doing his job. Agent Foster handed him a card. When you're ready to talk, call me. And Mr. Hayes, be careful. The people you're investigating have resources you can't imagine. So do I, Daniel said, thinking of Clara's determination and his own hard-won skills. So do I. Inside the building, he found chaos. Clara's emergency board meeting had leaked and the staff was buzzing with rumors. Janet met him at his office with a stack of reports and a worried expression. Mr. Wright's been making calls all morning, she said. He's trying to get the votes to override Miss Donovan's security changes. How many votes does he need? 7 of 12 board members. He has 5 confirmed, 2 leaning his way. Daniel did the math. If Wright succeeded, all their preparations would be worthless. Worse, it would signal to whoever was behind this that Donovan Technologies was vulnerable. He headed to the boardroom where raised voices could be heard through the closed doors. Security guards stood outside, looking uncomfortable. Through the glass panels, Daniel could see Clara at one end of the table, Wright at the other, the remaining board members arrayed between them like spectators at a gladiator match. His phone buzzed. Clara. Wright's about to call for a vote. I need something. Anything. Daniel thought fast. He couldn't enter the boardroom without cause, but he could create cause. He pulled out his phone and triggered the building's security alert, not the full evacuation, just the executive protection protocol. The boardroom doors locked automatically. The security guards looked to Daniel for instruction. Potential threat identified, he said loudly enough to be heard inside. Executive protection protocol in effect until cleared. Wright's face appeared at the glass, furious. This is ridiculous. You can't lock us in here. I can and I will, Mr. Wright. Your safety is my responsibility. Daniel held up his phone, showing the message from the unknown number.
We received a credible threat against senior leadership. Until I can verify everyone's safety, you stay put. This is obviously a ploy to... Mr. Wright. Daniel interrupted, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd commanded soldiers in combat. Are you suggesting I ignore a potential threat to board members' lives? Should I note that in my security report that you prioritized a vote over safety? Wright's face went purple, but he stepped back from the door. Daniel used the lockdown to run rapid background checks on all board members, present his phone connected to databases Jake had provided. Most came back clean, but 2 had anomalies, recent large deposits to offshore accounts that corresponded with the timing of the cyber attacks. He forwarded the information to Clara, who received it on her phone inside the locked boardroom. He watched through the glass as her expression shifted from concern to cold fury. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, her voice carrying despite the closed doors. I've just received some interesting information about unusual financial transactions involving board members. Mr.
Patterson, Mr. Reeves, would you care to explain the recent deposits to your Cayman Island accounts? The 2 men went white. Wright started to protest, but Clara raised her hand. The FBI is already aware of these transactions. Agent Foster is in fact waiting in the parking garage. Now we can handle this quietly with resignations and cooperation, or we can handle it publicly with handcuffs and perp walks. Your choice, gentlemen. Patterson broke first. It wasn't supposed to be like this. They said it was just competitive intelligence, nothing treasonous. Clara's voice was dangerously soft. We don't know names. Everything went through Wright. All eyes turned to the CFO, who was backing toward the wall. This is entrapment. You can't prove anything. Actually, Daniel said through the intercom, we can. Your computer's been monitored for the last 48 hours, Mr. Wright. Every email, every file transfer, every communication with your handlers. It's all documented. It was a bluff. They'd only been monitoring for 24 hours, but Wright didn't know that. His shoulders sagged in defeat. I needed the money, he said quietly. My divorce, the market crash, I was underwater on everything. They offered a solution. Who's they? Clara demanded. I don't know. Everything was anonymous cryptocurrency payments, encrypted communications, but they wanted access to the quantum encryption project. Clara's face went white. The quantum encryption project was their most classified work, worth billions to the Defense Department and priceless to foreign governments. When? She asked. Tomorrow night, during the security upgrade. They knew the systems would be cycling vulnerabilities exposed. Daniel felt the pieces click into place. Tomorrow night's trap had just become real. I'll call the FBI, Clara said. No. Daniel's voice was firm. Let them come. But now we know exactly what they're after and when they'll strike. We can be ready. You want to let foreign agents infiltrate my building? I want to catch them in the act with evidence that will stand up in court and send a message to anyone else thinking about trying this. Clara looked at him through the glass, a dozen arguments visible in her eyes. Then she nodded. Clear the lockdown, Mr. Hayes. We have preparations to make. Daniel released the locks, watching as security escorted Wright, Patterson, and Reeves out in handcuffs. Agent Foster had been happy to accept his call. The remaining board members sat in shocked silence. I believe, Clara said calmly, that concludes our discussion about security protocols, all in favor of Mr. Hayes's recommendations. Every hand rose. As the boardroom emptied, Clara approached Daniel in the hallway. Tomorrow night. Tomorrow night. You'll need backup. I'll have it. Professional backup, not just your army buddies. Clara, I know what I'm doing. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, you're planning to face an unknown number of foreign agents with what your winning personality and a fire extinguisher. Despite the tension, Daniel smiled. Worked last time. This isn't funny. I'm not laughing. He grew serious. But this is what you hired me for. Trust me to do my job. She wanted to argue, he could see it in every line of her body, but she nodded. Just come back alive. Ethan needs his father. Just Ethan. The question hung between them again, that dangerous territory they kept approaching but never entering. We all need you to come back, Clara said finally. The company needs its security director. That night, Daniel prepared meticulously. He He called Jake and two other veterans he trusted, men who'd faced worse odds in Afghanistan and come home walking. He studied the building blueprints until he could navigate them blindfolded. He positioned cameras, sensors, and deterrents in carefully chosen locations. And he thought about the message he'd received, the warning to walk away. Someone had known about Sarah, about his desperation. Someone had been watching him long before he'd started investigating, which meant this was bigger than corporate espionage. It was personal to someone. His phone rang at midnight. Clara. "Can't sleep," she said without preamble. "Me neither. I keep thinking about the mall, how fast everything happened. This won't be like that. We're prepared this time. Are we, or are we just telling ourselves that because the alternative is too frightening?" Daniel didn't have an answer for that. "If something happens tomorrow," Clara continued, "I need you to know something. Hiring you wasn't just about security, it was about hope. Seeing someone make the right choice simply because it was right. Without calculating cost or benefit, it reminded me that not everything in this world is transactional. Clara, let me finish. You and Ethan, you've brought something to our lives that we didn't know was missing. Lily hasn't had nightmares since you started coming to dinner, and I sleep better knowing you're watching over us. We should talk about this after tomorrow. Should we, or will we just find new reasons to avoid it?" She was right, but tomorrow's danger made everything else seem premature. "After tomorrow," he promised. "We'll talk about everything. I'll hold you to that." After she hung up, Daniel stood at his apartment window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, foreign agents were preparing to steal secrets that could compromise national security. Somewhere, Miranda Chen was probably feeding them final intelligence. And somewhere Clara was lying awake, trusting him to keep her world safe. Tomorrow would bring resolution one way or another. Either they'd stop the threat, or everything would come crashing down. But tonight, in the space between danger and action, Daniel allowed himself to think about afterwards. About Sunday dinners becoming tradition. About Ethan and Lily growing up as something like siblings. About Clara's hand in his, not as CEO and security director, but as something more. Tomorrow he'd face whatever came with the skills war had taught him and the determination love had given him. But tonight, he simply stood watch. Guardian of dreams he was only beginning to let himself share. The next day dawned gray and cold November, finally remembering what season it was supposed to be. Daniel dropped Ethan at school with an extra tight hug that made his son squirm. "Dad, you're being weird. Just love you, buddy." "Love you too, but you're still being weird." Daniel watched until Ethan disappeared into the building, then drove to Donovan Technologies. The black sedan was back Agent Foster keeping watch. He gave her a mock salute as he passed. Tonight she'd either be arresting foreign agents or investigating his corpse. He preferred the former. Clara was already in the security office when he arrived, looking like she hadn't slept. She dressed for war in a sharp black suit that meant business, her hair pulled back severely. "Miranda called in sick," she said without preamble. "First time in 2 years. She knows something's happening. Or she's been warned off." Clara pulled up security footage on the main screen. "I had the overnight shift review everything. Look at this." The footage showed the R&D building at 3 a.m. A van had pulled up to the loading dock, sat for exactly 3 minutes, then left. No one got in or out. "Reconnaissance," Daniel said. "They were timing the security patrol routes. Which means they're still coming tonight." Daniel's phone buzzed. Jake and his team had arrived, were setting up in the building across the street with clear sightlines to all entrances. Professional soldiers who'd traded uniforms for civilian clothes but never lost their edge. "Your backup?" Clara asked. "Part of it." "And the other part?" "You'll see." They spent the morning finalizing preparations. Daniel positioned cameras in blind spots Marcus had never noticed, installed motion sensors and air vents, and rigged silent alarms throughout the R&D facility. By noon, the building was as ready as he could make it. "You should go home," he told Clara. "Be with Lily. If something goes wrong." "If something goes wrong, I'll be exactly where I need to be. This is my company, Daniel. I'm not running. This isn't about courage. It's about keeping you safe." "No, it's about showing whoever's behind this that Clara Donovan doesn't abandon her people or her responsibilities." She met his eyes steadily. "Would you leave if positions were reversed?" He wouldn't, and they both knew it. "Then we do this together," she said. The afternoon crawled by with agonizing slowness. Daniel checked and rechecked equipment, ran through scenarios with Jake's team coordinated with building security, who thought this was just an elaborate drill. At 4 o'clock, he sent everyone home except essential personnel claiming system maintenance required a skeleton crew. At 5, Clara appeared with coffee and sandwiches. You need to eat. Not hungry. Wasn't a request. She pushed a sandwich toward him. Ethan needs you functional, not heroic. They ate in silence, the weight of coming violence hanging between them. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the city in shades of amber and shadow. Somewhere in that dying light, threats were mobilizing. I've been thinking, Clara said quietly, about what happens after tonight, assuming we survive. We'll survive. Your confidence is reassuring, if not entirely convincing. She turned her coffee cup in slow circles. But after, when the threat is neutralized and life goes back to normal, what then? Then we figure out what normal means. Does it mean Sunday dinners? Does it mean you and Ethan being part of our lives beyond professional obligations? Daniel set down his sandwich. What do you want it to mean? I want. She stopped, frustrated. I don't know how to do this. I negotiate billion-dollar deals, but I don't know how to tell you that watching you with Lily, seeing how gentle you are despite everything you've been through, it makes me feel things I thought I'd buried with my marriage. Clara, and I know it's complicated. You work for me. Our kids are involved. There are 1,000 reasons why this is a bad idea. But when you texted me at 3 in the morning about electromagnetic fields, I smiled for the first time that day. When Ethan fell asleep on my couch, it felt like home in a way that House hasn't in years. When you look at me, you see Clara, not the CEO or the billionaire or the divorcee, just Clara. Daniel wanted to reach for her to bridge the space between their chairs, but the monitors around them showed security feeds of a building under threat, reminding him why they were here. After tonight, he promised, we'll talk about everything. You keep saying that. Yeah, because I need you focused on surviving, not on what comes next. I'm a multitasker. Not tonight. Tonight you're just staying alive. At 7 o'clock, Daniel's phone chimed with a message from Jake. Movement, 3 vehicles approaching from different directions. They're here, Daniel told Clara. Time to go. They moved to the Security Command Center, a reinforced room with monitors showing every angle of the building. Clara had insisted on staying despite his protests, and he'd finally agreed on the condition that she wear a bulletproof vest. It made her look smaller, somehow more vulnerable, despite its protection. Vehicle 1 just passed the north entrance, Jake reported through the earpiece. 2 occupants, both male. Vehicle 2 coming up on the south loading dock, another teammate added. Female driver can't see passengers through the tinted windows. Daniel watched the feeds, his mind calculating angles and probabilities. They were being careful professional. This wasn't a smash and grab, it was a coordinated infiltration. There, Clara pointed to a monitor showing the parking garage. That janitor, we don't have anyone scheduled tonight. Daniel zoomed in on the figure pushing a cleaning cart. The uniform was right, but the gait was wrong, too smooth, too purposeful. Military training disguised, but not entirely hidden. First operative inside, he reported to Jake. Parking level 2. I have eyes on. More movement on the monitors. The vehicles had discharged passengers who melted into shadows around the building. Daniel counted at least 8 operatives, possibly more. They're not all going for the R&D facility, Clara observed. Look, 2 are heading for the executive level. Daniel's blood chilled. They weren't just after the quantum encryption project, they were after Clara herself. The theft was a distraction. Change of plans, he said into his mic. This is a kidnapping attempt. Primary target is Clara Donovan. Copy that? Adjusting positions. We need to get you out, Daniel told Clara. No, if I run now, they'll know we were ready. They'll disappear and try again later. She pulled up the building schematics. Besides, the executive level is locked down. They'll need time to breach. Time we can use. Daniel made a decision. Stay here. Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone but me. Where are you going? Hunting. He moved through the building like a ghost, using service corridors and maintenance shafts Marcus had never bothered to map. The first operative was in the stairwell climbing toward the executive level. Daniel waited in the shadows until the man passed, then struck with precise force a chokehold that cut off consciousness without permanent damage. He zip-tied the unconscious operative and took his equipment, a Chinese-made tactical rifle, night vision goggles, and a communications device crackling with Mandarin. "One down," he reported to Jake. "Two more entering the R&D level. They've got some kind of electronic lock breaker." Daniel moved toward R&D, but his phone buzzed with a security alert from the command center. Someone was trying to override the lock. Clara was trapped. He ran, no longer caring about stealth. The executive elevator was locked down, so he took the stairs 3 at a time, his healing arm protesting with each swing. 17th floor, 18th, 19th. Gunfire erupted somewhere below. Jake's team had engaged. "Multiple hostiles in the parking structure," Jake reported. "We're pinned. Can't provide support." Daniel reached the command center hallway to find 2 operatives working on the door. They turned at his approach weapons, rising. Daniel dove left as bullets sparked off the marble walls. He rolled behind a decorative pillar, mind racing. 2 against 1, they had superior position, and Clara was trapped behind them. Then he heard the fire alarm. Clara had triggered it from inside the command center. The sprinkler system activated, dousing the hallway in torrents of water. The operative's night vision became useless water droplets, fracturing the infrared into chaos. Daniel moved in the confusion muscle memory from a dozen night raids in Afghanistan guiding him. The first operative went down to a strike to the knee, followed by an elbow to the temple. The second managed to get a shot off the bullet, grazing Daniel's ribs before he could disarm and neutralize him. "Clear," he gasped into his mic, then pounded on the command center door. "Clara, it's me!" The door opened, and Clara pulled him inside, her eyes wide at the blood spreading across his shirt. "You're hit." "Grazed. I'm fine." Though fine was relative, the pain was significant and growing. "We need to move. They know you're here now." "The FBI. 20 minutes out, according to Jake. We need to survive until then." Through the monitors, they could see chaos throughout the building. Jake's team had engaged multiple operatives in the parking structure. Security guards were in firefights they'd never trained for. And somewhere Miranda Chen was probably coordinating it all. "There," Clara pointed to a monitor. "Is that?" Daniel looked and felt his blood run cold. Ethan was on the screen, standing in the lobby with Mrs. Chen. Not Miranda, Mrs. Chen, his neighbor, looking terrified as armed operatives surrounded them. "No," Daniel breathed. "No, no, no." His phone rang. Unknown number. "Mr. Hayes," a cultured voice with a slight accent said, "I believe we have something that belongs to you. If you hurt him. We have no interest in hurting children, but you have something we want, and now we have leverage." "What do you want?" "Clara Donovan, bring her to the lobby. You can take your son and go. Everyone wins." Daniel looked at Clara, who'd heard everything through the phone's speaker. She was already shaking her head. "That's not happening," Daniel said. "Then your son will pay for your stubbornness." The line went dead. Daniel stood frozen for a moment, every instinct screaming in different directions. Save Ethan. Protect Clara. Complete the mission. Be a father. Be a soldier. "Go," Clara said quietly. "What?" "Go save your son. I'll handle this." "They'll take you." "Maybe. But Ethan doesn't deserve to suffer for our fight." She moved to the weapons locker, pulling out a pistol with surprising familiarity. "I'm not helpless, Daniel. Go." "I can't leave you. You can't let them hurt Ethan. We both know that." She checked the pistol's magazine with practiced ease. "Besides, I have backup coming. 20 minutes. Is forever when your child is in danger. I know. Go." Daniel looked at her, this remarkable woman who was willing to face danger alone so he could save his son. "I'm coming back for you. I'm counting on it." He ran for the stairs, taking them so fast he nearly fell twice. Into his mic, "Jake, they have Ethan in the lobby. Multiple hostiles. Copy. We're trying to break through, but they've got us pinned. I'm going in alone. That's suicide. That's fatherhood." Daniel reached the second floor and stopped. Going through the main lobby entrance would get him and Ethan killed. But the maintenance tunnels Marcus had never mapped connected to the lobby's ventilation system. He could come up behind them. He He crawled through dusty vents, following the sound of voices, until he could see through a grate. 8 operatives in tactical gear, Mrs. Chen holding Ethan's hand in the center of their formation. His son's face was pale, but determined, that Hayes' stubbornness already showing through fear. "My dad's gonna stop you," Ethan was saying with complete confidence. "He stopped the bad man at the mall." One operative laughed. "Your father is one man. We are many." "He's not just one man," Ethan said. "He's my dad." The simple faith in those words nearly broke Daniel's composure. He positioned himself above the group, calculating angles. 8 operatives, all armed, all alert. He had one partially loaded rifle in surprise. Then he saw movement on the monitors visible through the security desk. Clara was on the move, but not running. She was heading toward the lobby, pistol in hand. "No," Daniel whispered. She was going to trade herself for Ethan. He had seconds to act before she arrived, and everything went to hell. Daniel kicked out the grate and dropped 15 feet onto the nearest operative. The man crumpled under the impact. Daniel rolled, came up firing. 2 more operatives down before they could react. Ethan down. His son dropped flat, pulling Mrs. Chen with him. Daniel moved through the chaos like death itself, every motion precise and lethal. Another operative fell to a strike that shattered his larynx. The 5th took a bullet to the shoulder that spun him into a marble pillar. The remaining 3 had recovered from their surprise and were returning fire. Daniel dove behind the security desk as bullets shredded the air where he'd been. He was pinned out of ammunition, and Ethan was still in the line of fire. Then Clara appeared in the doorway, her pistol raised. She fired with surprising accuracy, dropping one operative who'd been flanking Daniel's position. The distraction was enough. Daniel vaulted over the desk, closing the distance to the nearest threat. They went down in a tangle of limbs, fighting for control of the rifle. A shot rang out. Daniel felt the bullet pass inches from his head. The last operative had a clear shot and was lining up another. Dad, Ethan, had grabbed a fallen operative's weapon, the rifle almost as big as he was. He was trying to lift it to help, but he was 8 years old and the weapon was too heavy. The operative turned toward the boy, and Daniel saw his own death in that motion. Not his death, Ethan's. His son was about to die because Daniel had brought violence into their lives. Time slowed. Daniel threw himself forward, knowing he wouldn't make it in time. Clara fired, but her angle was bad. The operative's finger tightened on the trigger. The lobby's glass doors exploded inward. Agent Foster and a full FBI tactical team poured through, weapons raised. "Federal agents, drop your weapons." The last operative hesitated for a fraction of a second, calculating odds. It was enough. Foster's team fired simultaneously, and the threat dropped. "Clear," Foster shouted. "Building secure." Daniel reached Ethan in 2 strides, dropping to his knees and pulling his son against his chest. "I've got you. I've got you, buddy." "I knew you'd come," Ethan whispered against his shoulder. "You always come." Over Ethan's head, Daniel met Clara's eyes. She was pale but steady, the pistol still in her hand. She'd come to trade herself for his son. The weight of that sacrifice, that willingness to die for a child who wasn't even hers, hit him like a physical blow. "Thank you," he mouthed. She just nodded, then moved toward them. "Are you okay?" she asked Ethan. "I'm okay. You were really cool with that gun, Miss Donovan." "My father insisted I learn. Never thought I'd need it." She looked at Daniel. "You're bleeding. Again." He glanced down at his ribs where the graze had reopened, adding fresh blood to his shirt. "Becoming a habit. One you should break." Agent Foster approached, weapon holstered, but expression severe. "Mr. Hayes, Miss Donovan, we need statements, and medical attention for you, Hayes." "Statements can wait," Claire said in her CEO voice. "Mr. Hayes needs a hospital, and this child needs to go home." "Ma'am, this is a crime scene." "This is my building, Agent Foster. We'll give you full cooperation, but not until everyone's been treated and safe." She pulled out her phone. "I'm calling my lawyer. He'll coordinate with your office." Foster looked like she wanted to argue, but something in Clara's expression stopped her. "Fine, but I want full statements within 24 hours. "You'll have them." The paramedics arrived, swarming Daniel despite his protests. The ribs were indeed just a graze, but he'd torn something in his shoulder during the fight. They wanted to transport him, but he refused. "I'm not leaving my son." "Dad, I'm okay," Ethan said with that resilience children somehow possessed. Mrs. Chen is here. You should go get fixed. Mrs. Chen, who'd been silent through everything, finally spoke. I'm so sorry, Daniel. They came to my apartment, said they'd hurt my grandchildren if I didn't bring Ethan. I didn't know what else to do. It's not your fault. Daniel squeezed her shoulder. Anyone would have done the same. Jake appeared, his team having cleared the rest of the building. 12 operatives captured or neutralized. No casualties on our side except your ribs. The R&D facility is secure. They never got near the quantum project. Because that was never the real target, Clara said. I was. Why? Foster asked, having overheard. Ransom leverage. Control, Clara answered. Whoever's behind this wanted to control Donovan Technologies' defense contracts. Taking me would have given them that. We'll find out who's responsible, Foster promised. The operatives will be interrogated. But Daniel had a feeling the operatives were just hired guns mercenaries who knew nothing about their real employers. The true puppeteers would remain hidden, planning their next move. We should go, Clara said. All of us. My house has better security than this building right now. I can't impose, Mrs. Chen started. You protected Ethan as best you could. You're not imposing. Clara's tone brooked no argument. We're all going, together. They formed an odd convoy. Clara's bulletproof SUV FBI escort vehicles. Jake's team following at a distance. Daniel sat in the back with Ethan pressed against his good side. Clara on the other side with her hand resting on Ethan's shoulder. The gesture was so naturally maternal, it made Daniel's chest tight. Miss Donovan, Ethan said quietly as they drove through the city. Yes. Are you and my dad friends now? Like real friends? Clara and Daniel exchanged glances over his head. Yes, Clara said simply. Real friends. Good. Because Lily needs a friend like my dad. Someone who keeps the bad people away. We all need friends like that, Clara agreed. At the estate, Helena had somehow prepared for their arrival guest rooms, ready hot food waiting, that magical housekeeper ability to anticipate needs. Lily ran to Clara, then surprised everyone by hugging Daniel too. Mommy said you stopped bad people again, she said against his leg. You're really good at that. Too good, Clara murmured, but she was smiling. They settled Ethan and Mrs. Chen in guest rooms, FBI agents taking positions around the property. Jake's team set up their own perimeter military paranoia, not trusting federal competence. The house became a fortress of overlapping security. Later, after the children were asleep and Mrs. Chen had been given a sedative by Clara's personal physician, Daniel found Clara in her study. She'd changed out of her tactical clothes into soft pajamas that made her look younger, more vulnerable. Quite a day, she said, pouring 2 glasses of what was probably obscenely expensive scotch. Not exactly how I planned it. No. She handed him a glass. You mean you didn't plan to fight 12 operatives, get shot again, and traumatize your son? The getting shot part is becoming an unfortunate pattern. They drank in silence for a moment, the weight of survival settling over them. You came for Ethan, Daniel said finally. You were going to trade yourself. Of course I was. He's 8 years old. He doesn't deserve to be collateral damage in adult wars. Neither do you. I'm not 8. I know what I signed up for when I took defense contracts. She stared into her glass. But seeing him there terrified but trying to be brave, I couldn't let them hurt him, even if it meant don't. Daniel set down his glass and moved closer. Don't even think it. Why not? You think it every time you throw yourself between danger and someone else. That's different. Because you're expendable. She laughed bitterly. We've had this conversation. Because I'm trained for it. So am I, apparently. Did you see that shot I made? My father would be proud. They were standing close now, the space between them charged with more than adrenaline aftermath. Clara, Daniel said softly, what are we doing? I don't know. Surviving, protecting our children, pretending we're not falling for each other. The admission hung in the air like a challenge. I work for you, Daniel pointed out. I'll fire you. I'm poor. I don't care. Our kids already love each other. Lily asked if Ethan could be her brother. Daniel felt his resistance crumbling. This is complicated.
Everything worth doing is... Clara set down her own glass and stepped closer. Daniel, I've spent 3 years building walls to protect myself and Lily. You walked through them like they weren't even there. That terrifies me and thrills me in equal measure. I'm not good at relationships. Sarah was the only woman I ever... And Richard was supposed to be my forever. We're both broken, Daniel. Maybe that's why we fit. She reached up her hand, touching the blood that had dried on his shirt. You keep bleeding for us. I'll stop if you want. Never. She looked up at him, and he saw everything in her eyes: fear, hope, desire, trust. I need you to keep being exactly who you are. The man who saves little girls in yellow dresses. The father who teaches electromagnets. The soldier who stands between danger and innocence. And what do you need for yourself? Just you. Complicated, heroic, stubborn you. Daniel kissed her, then weeks of tension and fear and growing love crystallizing into a single moment. She tasted like expensive scotch and possibility like Sunday dinners and shared custody of each other's hearts. When they pulled apart, both breathing unsteadily, Clara smiled. That's going to make staff meetings interesting. You could fire me, Daniel suggested. Avoid the awkwardness. Nice try, you're stuck with this job. With us. Promise. I promise. Although you have to stop getting shot. It's bad for my insurance premiums. They stood together in the study, two damaged people who'd found something worth protecting in each other. Outside, federal agents and Army veterans kept watch. Upstairs, their children slept safely. And somewhere in the city, threats regrouped and reconsidered. But tonight, in this moment, they were safe. They were together. They were becoming something neither had dared hope for, a family born not from blood, but from choice, from sacrifice, from the simple act of running toward danger instead of away. Stay, Clara said softly. Not in the guest room. Stay with me. Daniel thought of all the reasons he shouldn't professionalism timing the example for their children. Then he thought of Clara facing down armed operatives to save his son of Lily's arms, around his neck of Sunday dinners and butterfly pancakes. Okay, he said simply. They went upstairs together, checking on both children first. Ethan had kicked off his covers, and Daniel tucked him back in, pressing a kiss to his forehead. Lily had her stuffed rabbit clutched tight, and Clara smoothed her hair gently. In Clara's room, a space that managed to be both elegant and warm, they lay together fully clothed on top of the covers, neither ready for more than proximity. Daniel's ribs ached, his shoulder throbbed, but Clara's head on his good shoulder made the pain irrelevant. What happens tomorrow? She asked in the darkness. We deal with the FBI, we strengthen security, we figure out who's really behind this. I meant with us. We tell the kids, we weather the gossip, we make it work. You make it sound simple. The important things usually are. It's everything else that's complicated. Clara was quiet for so long he thought she'd fallen asleep. Then, Daniel, yeah, thank you for saving my life. Again, thank you for being worth saving. She laughed softly against his chest. I'm difficult, demanding, and I'll probably try to control everything. I'm stubborn, overprotective, and I'll definitely resist your control. We're going to fight. Probably. The board will have opinions. Definitely. The media will have a field day. Let them. She lifted her head to look at him in the darkness. You're really not scared of any of that. I'm scared of lots of things. Losing Ethan, failing to protect you and Lily, the Honda finally dying completely. He touched her face gently, but I'm not scared of fighting for this. For us. Even if it's hard. Especially if it's hard. The easy things aren't worth much. Clara kissed him again, soft and sure. I'm keeping you Daniel Hayes, you and your son and your terrible car and your hero complex. And I'm keeping you Clara Donovan, you and your daughter and your mansion and your tendency to face down armed operatives. They lay together as the house settled around them, as their children slept safely, as the world outside continued its dangerous spin. Tomorrow would bring complications, FBI investigations, media attention, the challenge of blending two very different families. But tonight they had this two people who'd found each other across an impossible divide, who'd chosen love over fear,
trust over isolation. 6 months later, spring had transformed the estate's gardens into a riot of color that served as the backdrop for an unlikely gathering. The company picnic, Clara's first attempt at breaking down the walls between executive leadership and regular employees, sprawled across the manicured lawns with a democratic chaos that would have horrified the previous board of directors. Daniel stood at the grill wearing an apron that said, "World's Okayest Dad," a Father's Day gift from Ethan that had made Clara laugh until she cried. Around him, Donovan Technologies employees mingled with their families, the rigid corporate hierarchy temporarily suspended in favor of hamburgers and potato salad. "You're burning the burgers," Jake observed now, officially part of the security team as deputy director. "I'm caramelizing them," Daniel corrected, though he quickly flipped the suspicious-looking patties. "Is that what we're calling it?" Across the lawn, Clara was deep in conversation with Agent Foster, who'd become something of a regular visitor in the months since the attempted kidnapping. The FBI investigation had uncovered a web of corporate espionage stretching from Beijing to Silicon Valley, with tentacles in a dozen American companies. Miranda Chen had been arrested trying to flee the country, turning state's evidence in exchange for a reduced sentence. She'd been recruited through blackmail about her brother's gambling debts, a reminder that everyone had vulnerabilities. Wright-Patterson and Reeves had all been convicted of conspiracy and espionage, their sentences ranging from 15 to 25 years. The Chinese operatives had been quietly deported in a prisoner exchange that never made the news. And somewhere in Beijing, someone had learned that Donovan Technologies was no longer an easy target. Dad, Ethan, ran up Lily close behind. They were both grass-stained and grinning, having discovered that rolling down the estate's main hill was the height of entertainment. "Can we have ice cream before lunch?" "That's not how meals work, buddy." "But Miss Clara said it was okay if you said it was okay," Lily added, employing the kind of circular logic that 8-year-olds excelled at. Daniel looked over at Clara, who was studiously not meeting his eye while obviously fighting a smile. "Did she now?" "She said you're a pushover for strawberry ice cream," Ethan added helpfully. "Traitor," Daniel called to Clara, who finally looked over and shrugged innocently. "Fine, 1 scoop each, but you eat real food after." The children scampered off toward the ice cream station that had been Lily's specific request for the picnic. Daniel watched them go, still, sometimes amazed at how seamlessly they'd become siblings in all but blood. Ethan now had his own room at the estate right next to Lily's. They attended the same private school Clara had insisted on paying the tuition despite Daniel's protests. They fought and made up with the casual intensity of family. "You've gone soft," Jake observed. "The Daniel Hayes I knew in Kandahar would never have caved on ice cream before lunch." "The Daniel Hayes didn't have 2 kids giving him puppy eyes." "2 kids, huh?" Daniel didn't answer, but his eyes found Clara again. She'd changed out of her CEO armor into sundress that made her look years younger, her hair loose in the spring breeze. As if sensing his gaze, she glanced over and smiled that private smile that was just for him. They'd been navigating their relationship with careful deliberation these past months. Clara had restructured the corporate hierarchy, so Daniel no longer reported directly to her, avoiding any ethical complications. They'd introduced the relationship to the board as a fait accompli weathering. Thomas Wright's replacement snide comments about inappropriate workplace romance with unified indifference. The media had been predictably sensational. From hero to executive suite, the security guard who won the billionaire's heart had been one of the tamer headlines. But after a few weeks of finding nothing scandalous beyond 2 single parents falling in love, they'd moved on to other prey. The real challenge had been smaller, more personal. Learning to blend their vastly different worlds. Daniel still drove the Honda, though it now shared garage space with Clara's Bentley. He'd kept the apartment for a while, needing that anchor to his old life, but had finally let it go last month when Ethan asked why they were paying for a place they never slept at. "Incoming," Jake warned, and Daniel turned to see Helena approaching with a phone. "Mr. Hayes, sorry to interrupt. There's a call for you. They say it's urgent." Daniel took the phone, expecting a security issue. Instead, a familiar voice made his blood run cold. "Staff Sergeant Hayes, this is Colonel Mitchell from Pentagon Intelligence." "Colonel, it's been a while." "Too long. Listen, we have a situation. The technology you protected at Donovan, the quantum encryption, we need someone with your specific expertise for a consultation. Strictly advisory, but it's critical. Daniel's eyes found Clara, who was watching with sudden concern. I'm retired colonel. I know, but your country needs you. Just a few days. We'll make it worth your while. I need to discuss this with my family. There was a pause. Family. Right, the Donovan situation. That's actually part of why we need you. Your unique position gives you insights we need. After Daniel hung up, Clara was already beside him, having read his expression from across the lawn. What is it? Pentagon wants me for a consultation. Something about the quantum encryption project. The one the Chinese tried to steal. Yeah, they say they need my expertise, but something feels off. Clara's hand found his, their fingers interlacing with practiced ease. You think it's a trap? I think someone's playing a game we don't understand yet. Before Clara could respond, a commotion erupted near the dessert table. One of the newer employees, a programmer named David Chen. No relation to Miranda, had collapsed. Daniel moved instantly, his combat medical training kicking in. The man was convulsing foam at his mouth, suggesting poisoning. Everyone back, Daniel ordered, checking the man's vitals. Jake, call 911. Nobody touch any of the food. Clara was already on her phone with security locking down the estate. Parents grabbed children, the festive atmosphere evaporating into controlled panic. Daniel worked to keep David stable, but he could see they were losing him. Who had access to the food? Clara demanded of Helena. The catering company. They've done our events for years. Daniel's mind raced. David Chen had been hired 3 months ago, part of the quantum encryption team. If someone wanted to eliminate key personnel, it wasn't random, he told Clara quietly. David was targeted. The ambulance arrived in minutes, paramedics taking over, but Daniel could see in their eyes what he already knew: it was too late. David Chen died before they reached the hospital. The estate became a crime scene for the second time in 6 months. FBI agents interviewed everyone while hazmat teams tested all the food. Families were sent home after giving statements. The children were sequestered in the house with Helena, away from the chaos. Agent Foster found Daniel and Clara in the study as the sun was setting, her expression grim. Polonium, she said without preamble. Traces in his coffee cup. This was assassination, not mass poisoning. Polonium means state actors, Daniel said. Russia's signature. Which doesn't make sense, Clara added. The Chinese were behind the previous attempt. Unless someone wants us to think it was Russia, Foster said. Chen was working on something specific within the quantum project, wasn't he? Clara nodded slowly. A vulnerability assessment. He'd found potential weaknesses in the encryption that needed patching. Weaknesses someone might not want patched, Daniel concluded. Someone who's planning to exploit them. Foster's phone rang. She listened, her face paling. There's been another poisoning in Seattle. Another programmer working on quantum encryption for Boeing. It's starting, Daniel said. Someone's eliminating everyone who could stop them from breaking the encryption. But why now? Clara asked. Why wait 6 months? Daniel's phone buzzed with a text from Colonel Mitchell. Have you considered our offer? Time is of the essence. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Because they needed time to position their assets. The Pentagon consultation isn't real. Someone's trying to get me away from here. Away from protecting Clara, Foster added. You've become too good at your job, Hayes. They can't get to her with you here. So they remove me with a fake Pentagon summons, then make their move. Daniel stood pacing. We need to verify if Colonel Mitchell is real. Foster was already on it, making calls. 5 minutes later, she had an answer. Colonel Mitchell retired 2 years ago. Whoever called you was using his identity. The implications were chilling. Someone had penetrated military intelligence databases, stolen identities, and was systematically eliminating obstacles to stealing the quantum encryption technology. This wasn't corporate espionage anymore. It was an act of war. We need to move Clara and Lily to a secure location, Daniel said. No. Clara's voice was firm. We tried running and hiding after the last attempt. It didn't work. They just waited and planned something worse. This is different. They're killing people now. One person,
targeted specifically. Clara moved to the window looking out at the grounds where hours ago families had been laughing. If I run every time someone threatens me, I'll never stop running. Neither will Lily. Clara. Besides, she turned back to them. They don't want me dead. If they did, they had 6 months to make it happen. They want me alive but vulnerable. The question is why? Daniel knew she was right, but every instinct screamed to bundle her and the children into a car and disappear. Fine, but we double security. Nobody gets near you or the kids without going through multiple checkpoints. Agreed, and Daniel, no Pentagon consultations. Wasn't planning on it. Foster left to coordinate with her team, leaving Daniel and Clara alone in the gathering darkness. She moved into his arms, resting her head against his chest. I'm scared, she admitted quietly. Good. Fear keeps you careful. Are we ever going to be free of this? Or is this our life now, constant threats looking over our shoulders, wondering if the next company picnic will include assassination? Daniel wished he could lie to her, offer comfort that everything would be fine, but she deserved truth. I don't know. The technology you're developing is too valuable, too dangerous in the wrong hands. There will always be someone trying to steal it. Then maybe we shouldn't develop it. You don't mean that, she sighed. No, I don't. The quantum encryption could protect millions of people, prevent cyber attacks, secure infrastructure. I can't walk away from that responsibility. And I can't walk away from protecting you. Even if it puts Ethan at risk. That was the question that haunted Daniel's nights. Every threat to Clara was a potential threat to his son. But walking away wouldn't make them safer. Whoever was behind this had already shown they knew about Ethan, had used him as leverage once before. Ethan's already at risk just by being my son. At least here with you, we have resources to protect him. Clara pulled back to look at him. That's not the only reason you stay. No, Daniel admitted. I stay because I love you, because Ethan loves you and Lily, because somewhere in the last 6 months we became a family. A complicated, danger-prone, definitely dysfunctional family. The best kind. She kissed him then, soft and desperate, a promise and a plea wrapped together. When they pulled apart, both heard footsteps in the hallway. Ethan and Lily appeared in the doorway, both in pajamas, both looking worried. Is the bad man gone? Lily asked. Which bad man, sweetheart? Clara asked gently. The one who hurt Mr. David. Daniel and Clara exchanged glances. They'd tried to keep the children away from the chaos, but kids always knew more than adults thought. He's gone, Daniel said, but we're being very careful to make sure nobody else gets hurt. Is that why there are more guards? Ethan asked. Jake said we're adding 12 more people to the security team. That's part of it, buddy. The children climbed onto the couch between them, seeking comfort in proximity. Daniel wrapped an arm around Ethan while Clara held Lily close. Are we safe? Lily asked in a small voice. Yes, Clara said firmly. Daniel keeps us safe. And Mom keeps us safe, too. Ethan added the word Mom, coming naturally, now when referring to Clara. She's really smart and tough. We keep each other safe, Daniel corrected. That's what families do. They sat together as full darkness fell, the weight of threat balanced against the warmth of belonging. Outside, additional security took positions around the estate. Somewhere in the city, Agent Foster coordinated with federal resources to identify the new threat. And somewhere else, enemies planned their next move in a game whose rules kept changing. But in this moment, in this room, they were just a family, unusual, imperfect, forged in crisis, but sustained by choice. Daniel thought about the mall, that split-second decision to save a little girl in a yellow dress. How that moment had rippled outward, changing everything, bringing him here to this complicated happiness. His phone buzzed with another text from the fake Colonel Mitchell, Last chance, Hayes. Accept our offer or face the consequences. Daniel showed it to Clara, who took his phone and typed back, Come and try. That might provoke them, Daniel warned. Good. I'm tired of waiting for the next attack. If they want to fight, let's give them one. That's not very CEO-like thinking. No, Clara agreed, but it's very much like thinking from someone who's tired of people threatening her family. Family. The word settled between them like a vow. Whatever came next, they'd face it together.
The warehouse worker turned security director, the billionaire CEO with a fighter's heart, and two children who'd learned too young that love sometimes meant standing between danger and innocence. The next morning brought a new development. David Chen's apartment had been searched, revealing something unexpected. He'd been investigating the quantum encryption vulnerabilities on his own time, but not to patch them. He'd been planning to sell the information to the highest bidder. So he wasn't an innocent victim, Foster explained over breakfast. He was killed because he was competition. Someone else wants those vulnerabilities, and they eliminated Chen to prevent him from selling them first. Which means, Daniel said slowly, the attack is imminent. They wouldn't risk a murder unless they were ready to move. Clara set down her coffee cup. The next board meeting is Thursday. All senior staff will be present, including the quantum team leaders. Perfect opportunity to strike, Daniel agreed. They'll expect me to be at the Pentagon. So we give them what they expect, Clara said, that dangerous gleam in her eye that appeared when she was planning something devious. You publicly leave for Washington. Make sure everyone knows you're gone. And actually, you'll be exactly where they don't expect, right here waiting for them. It was risky using themselves as bait again, but they'd learned something important over the last 6 months. The best defense was sometimes a carefully orchestrated offense. Ethan and Lily go to your mother's in Florida, Daniel insisted. Non-negotiable. Agreed. Helena goes with them. They spent the next 2 days preparing an elaborate deception. Daniel made visible preparations for a trip to Washington, booking flights, arranging meetings, even packing bags that went to the airport. Meanwhile, Jake's team prepared the real surprise, a trap that would catch whoever came for Clara and the quantum technology. Wednesday night, Daniel said goodbye to Ethan at the airport, the hug lasting longer than necessary. It's just for a few days, Daniel promised. I know, but be careful, Dad. Mom needs you. The casual way Ethan called Clara Mom still made Daniel's chest tight. I'll be careful. You take care of Lily and Grandma. Grandma says I can learn to surf. Of course she does. After watching the children's plane take off with Helena and 2 undercover security agents, Daniel didn't board his own flight. Instead, he slipped out a service entrance and into a waiting car driven by Jake. You sure about this? Jake asked. No, but it's better than waiting for them to choose the time and place. They drove back to the estate through back roads, Daniel hidden in the back seat. The house was officially empty except for Clara and minimal security, perfect bait for anyone watching. That night, Daniel took position in the panic room Clara had installed after the first attack monitors showing every angle of the house and grounds. Clara was in her study working late, as was her habit, maintaining the illusion of normalcy. At 2 a.m. they came. Not through the gates or over the walls, but from below the old steam tunnels that ran beneath the estate, a vulnerability Marcus had never identified, but Daniel had found weeks ago. He'd left them deliberately unguarded, a honey trap for anyone smart enough to find them. 4 figures emerged from a maintenance hatch in the garden, moving with professional silence toward the house. Daniel tracked them on infrared, noting their positions, their weapons, their formation. Special forces trained, but not American. The gate suggested European, possibly British or German. 4 hostiles in the garden, he whispered into his mic. Jake, hold position. Let them enter. The intruders bypassed the alarm system with embarrassing ease. Daniel had deliberately left certain codes unchanged to make them overconfident. They entered through the kitchen, spreading out in a search pattern. Clara played her part perfectly, appearing to work obliviously in her study as footsteps approached. The lead intruder entered weapon raised, and Clara's scream of surprise was entirely genuine, despite being planned. Don't move, Miss Donovan, the man said in accented English. German, Daniel confirmed. We're not here to hurt you if you cooperate. What do you want? Access to the quantum files. Transfer them to this drive. He tossed a USB device onto her desk. Any tricks and things become unpleasant. Clara's hand shook as she inserted the drive. The shaking was real, the fear was not. The drive contained Jake's surprise, a virus that would track back to whoever received the files while appearing to transfer the requested data. It's done, she said after a few minutes. Excellent. Now you're coming with us. Insurance, you understand. That wasn't the plan, another intruder said sharply. Plans change. She's too valuable to leave behind. This was the moment. Daniel moved through hidden passages he'd mapped over months, emerging behind the intruders in the hallway. The first one went down silently to a chokehold. The second managed to shout before Daniel's strike dropped him. The two in the study spun, weapons rising, but Clara had already dropped behind the desk. Daniel rolled as bullets sparked off the doorframe, came up firing with the tranquilizer gun he preferred for non-lethal takedowns. One intruder staggered and fell. The leader grabbed Clara, using her as a shield. "Back off, or she dies." "You're not going to kill her," Daniel said calmly, weapon steady. "She's your meal ticket. Without her, you have nothing to sell." "I don't need to kill her, just hurt her enough to make you cooperate." The man's knife appeared, pressing against Clara's throat. A bead of blood appeared, and Daniel saw red. "Mistake," he said quietly. The lights went out, Jake's timing perfect. In the darkness, Daniel moved by memory and instinct. The knife clattered away. A body hit the floor. When the lights returned seconds later, the leader was unconscious, and Clara was in Daniel's arms, a thin line of blood on her throat, the only damage. "You're late," she said shakily. "Traffic was terrible." FBI agents flooded the house, Foster leading them with barely contained fury. "You should have told us about the trap and risk a leak." Clara was already back in CEO mode despite the blood on her neck. "We needed them confident enough to take the bait." The four intruders were processed, their equipment cataloged. The USB drive was analyzed, revealing its destination, a server in Switzerland linked to a private military company that sold to the highest bidder. "Mercenaries," Foster said with disgust. "They were going to auction the quantum technology." "Not anymore," Clara said. "The virus Jake planted will destroy any system that tries to access the fake files, and now we know where they are." By dawn, Swiss authorities, in cooperation with Interpol, had raided the military company's headquarters, arresting 17 people and seizing servers full of stolen corporate secrets from dozens of companies. The quantum encryption technology was safe, the immediate threat neutralized. Daniel and Clara stood on the estate's main balcony, watching the sun rise over gardens that had seen too much violence. She leaned against him, exhaustion finally showing. "Is it over?" she asked. "This round is. There'll be others." "There always are." She turned in his arms. "But we'll be ready. Together." "Together," Daniel agreed, sealing the promise with a kiss. 2 days later, the children returned from Florida, tanned and chattering about surfing lessons. The estate returned to its new normal, enhanced security protocols, regular FBI check-ins, but also family dinners and homework help, and the casual chaos of two 8-year-olds who considered themselves siblings. At the next board meeting, Clara announced a new initiative hiring veterans for security positions across all Donovan Technologies facilities, with Daniel leading the program. It would provide jobs for those who'd served while ensuring the company had protection from people who understood real threats. "From warehouse to boardroom," one member commented. "Quite a journey, Mr. Hayes." "Every journey starts with a single step," Daniel replied. "Mine just happened to be toward a little girl who needed help." Lily, who'd been allowed to attend the meeting's conclusion, beamed at him from her seat beside Clara. "And now he protects all of us." "That's the job," Daniel said, but his eyes found Clara's, and the truth was deeper. It wasn't just a job anymore. It was a calling, a purpose, a family built from crisis but sustained by love. Later, as spring evening settled over the estate, and the four of them played board games in the living room, Daniel reflected on the strange path that had brought him here. 6 months ago, he'd been nobody, a struggling single father working nights to make rent. Now he was director of security for a Fortune 500 company, partner to one of the country's most powerful CEOs, and part of a family that shouldn't work, but somehow did. The threats would continue. There would always be someone trying to steal what Donovan Technologies created, someone willing to use violence to get it. But they'd face those threats together, this unlikely family forged in a mall's chaos and tempered by shared danger. "Dad," Ethan said, interrupting his thoughts. "Your turn." Daniel looked at the Monopoly board where his son had somehow acquired most of the properties despite being 8. Clara was laughing at something Lily had whispered. Outside, Jake's team maintained their watch. The world spun on dangerous and beautiful in equal measure.
Dad, Ethan prompted again. Sorry, buddy, just thinking. About what? Daniel looked at his son at Lily, carefully organizing her play money at Clara, meeting his eyes with that smile that was just for him. About how sometimes the worst moments lead to the best outcomes. Like when you got shot but met Clara and Lily. Exactly like that. Clara reached over, taking his hand. No regrets. None, Daniel said, meaning it completely. Not one. As they played on into the evening, the estate's elaborate security system hummed quietly in the background. Jake's team kept their vigil, and somewhere in the night, new threats were undoubtedly forming. But in this room, in this moment, they were simply a family, unexpected, imperfect, and absolutely worth every risk. The game continued, Ethan's business empire growing while Lily staged a comeback with strategic hotel placement. Clara played with ruthless efficiency that made Daniel laugh. And outside, spring continued its patient transformation of the world, promising new growth from ground that had seen too much conflict. They were safe. They were together. They were home. And that Daniel thought, as Ethan crowed about another monopoly, was worth any price, even taking a bullet in a mall for a stranger who'd become everything.